Chapter 771. Half an hour ago, in the evening, it was raining heavily. A van was parked at the back door of Izakaya. The young man who jumped out of the van in the rain took off his raincoat and bowed slightly to the lady boss who had been waiting for a long time. "Dinner for 80 people, please." "It's already been prepared." Ms. Jean Jiang pointed at the large thermal box next to her. "It's raining so heavily. Do you want to come in and drink some ginger soup?" "No need. Everyone in the group is still waiting for dinner. If they're hungry, those guys will get angry." The young man called Mr. Najima waved his hand embarrassedly and refused the lady boss's help. He wanted to pick up the box, but he couldn't. Instead, he almost sprained his back, and his face flushed red. "It's so heavy. It's dinner for 80 people, Mr. Najima. It's too much for you to handle by yourself." Before Ms. Jean Jiang finished speaking, the girl next to her reached out and easily lifted the box. She blinked her blank eyes. "It's not that heavy. Boss, where should I put this?" Ms. Jean Jiang's face stiffened. She wanted to pinch the face of this guy who still couldn't see the air and twist it a few times. Instead, the young man called Mr. Najima waved his hand carelessly. "Oh, this must be Miss Maki. I heard from that guy Uehara that you're very strong, but I didn't believe it. Please put it in the trunk for me." After putting the box in, Najima politely said goodbye and went back to the van while rubbing his back. In the rain, the van started. The driver laughed when he saw Mr. Najima's haggard appearance. "I told you, it's heavy, and you didn't want my help." "Shut up." Najima rolled his eyes at him. After wiping the rain off his face, he turned off the noisy rock music on the radio, took out a notebook from his pocket, and continued to memorize words. "Hink, hink, Hinc, Astra, Astra, Esdra." Seeing how serious he was, the driver couldn't help but shake his head. "You're so hard-working. You memorized it in the morning and forgot it in the afternoon. What's the point of learning this stuff?" "I like it. It's none of your business." Neo Dao rolled his eyes at him. He kept the book in his hand and continued to recite silently. However, the person next to him seemed to be disturbing him and started singing loudly. Neo Dao was so angry that he kicked this bastard. "Enough! I'm looking after the car." His companion pushed him. "Don't disturb the driver." Boom! In the sweeping rain, a Land Rover suddenly roared out from the dark alley. It broke through the rain and suddenly smashed into the side of the van. With a loud bang, the world turned upside down. Neo Dao's vision turned black. He felt like he was being flung around like a rag, colliding violently. Fortunately, I wore a seatbelt. Otherwise, I would have been thrown out. When he woke up from his stupor, he saw his companion lying on the steering wheel. His head was bleeding, and he didn't know if he was dead or alive. F***, the airbag is broken. Neo Dao panted with difficulty and wanted to push his shoulder. Then, he heard a sound outside the window. Someone knocked on the broken window, and a mocking smile appeared on the familiar face. "Mr. Neo Dao, you've been living a good life recently." The few people who came down from the Land Rover looked at him through the window. The leader narrowed his eyes and grinned. "You didn't even pick up the phone. Seems like you've really abandoned the dark and joined the light." Iron King faction. In an instant, he was stunned. His worries for the past few days surged into his heart. In his shock, Neo Dao was dumbfounded. Then, he suddenly asked, "Why are you guys only here now?" "Huh?" The people from Iron King faction were also stunned. "I thought you guys had forgotten about me." Neo Dao pulled his seatbelt angrily and roared, "If you really want to do it, why don't you guys inform me in advance? F***, just kill me as well." "Huh?" The people couldn't react in time. Then, they became suspicious. "Why didn't you pick up the phone? Everyone's mobile phones have been confiscated. Okay? Didn't you see? Even I'm suspected." Neo Dao replied angrily. "Someone is watching me when I come out to take a meal. Otherwise, I would have poisoned the people from Huaiji Group to death. Why would I need you guys?" Outside the car, a few people looked at each other. Then, the leader reacted and squeezed out a happy smile. "Very good, Mr. Neo Dao. I wasn't wrong about you. I was wondering why a good man like Neo Dao would become a traitor. Are you guys going to launch a surprise attack on Huaiji Group?" Neo Dao looked and volunteered. "I'll show you the way." "There's no need for that. The leader shook his head and pressed on the pistol in his pocket. Then he suddenly asked, "Where's Huai Ji group?" "He went out," Niu Dao answered without hesitation. "He went to Laha's house for a banquet. Now, Huai Ji group is empty. There's not a single ascender." Before he could finish, a sinister voice sounded from behind the crowd. It was like a ferocious silhouette formed by countless squirming hairs. It spoke impatiently. "He's lying." In an instant, everyone looked at Niu Dao with a subtle expression. In the silence, Niu Dao stood rooted to the ground. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He only sighed. He raised his hand and gave the man outside the window a middle finger. "Eat sh**T. After a long groping, Niu Dao suddenly reached out and pulled out the pistol in his toolbox. He aimed at the face and pulled the trigger. The gunshot rang out in the rain. Then it calmed down again. In front of the burning car, a hand made of countless hairs pulled Niu Dao out of the car. Pairs of strange eyes appeared and stared at his face. "Huai Ji group, where are you?" Niu Dao smiled and closed his eyes. He only heard the sound of a phone ringing in the distance. Then, an intense pain came crashing down like a tide. The moment he was stared at by the eye at close range, Huai Shi felt a vicious curse coiling around his soul like a snake. It quickly shrank and seeped into his soul. It invaded the sacred mark and bone burial sanctuary. Then, there was no then, it was immediately devoured by the rotten dream substance burning on the banner, becoming a part of the rotten dream substance in the dream cage. A miracle might not be useless in front of a stronger miracle, but once a curse met a stronger curse, it would be useless. Huai Shi only felt his vision darken under the impact of the aftershock. Then, the tip of his nose heated up and started bleeding. It looked like he had drunk too much ginseng chicken soup and had overnourished his body. His entire person was full of energy. Huai Shi raised his hand and wiped the blood from his nose that was quickly diluting in the rain. He asked curiously, "What are you looking at?" The eye above the wriggling hair was stunned for a moment. Then, as if it didn't believe it, it looked again. Then, Huai Shi became even more energetic. He couldn't help but laugh. "Are you here to attack me, or to give me nourishment?" In the distance, the 100-eyed devils covered in hair were stunned for a moment. Then, their eyes became even more ferocious. "Boss, catch!" In the ruins of the house, behind the burning basket of the car, Weno finally found the golf bag in the broken trunk of the car. After opening the bag, he pulled out a heavy katana and threw it at Huai Shi with all his might. In midair, the sharp black hair swept past, and the katana was instantly broken in half. Then, thousands of pairs of evil eyes turned and looked indifferently in Weno's direction. The moment the evil light burst forth, it discovered that Huai Shi's face was already very close to it. He grinned and smiled. The sound of Emperor Yu's step breaking through the air exploded. The curtain of the torrential rain suddenly twisted, setting off a white wave. Then, it saw the metal ball in Huai Shi's hand that was as large as a human head. It was shiny and round, and even the clear sound of a mechanical watch ticking could be heard. Before it could get close, the countless eyes shrank, and thousands of sharp, evil lights swept in all directions. Then there was a loud explosion. A flash of light suddenly exploded. The improved recipe for Ramses' wrath had been added with a large amount of magnesium powder, and it instantly ignited, creating a scorching light that was as bright as the rising sun. The light, which was strong enough to scorch a normal person's eyes, only caused the 100-eyed demon's vision to darken for a moment. Then, a pungent smell spread out from the hot wind. The pungent smell of blood and alcohol mixed together. The pungent, poisonous wine turned into a mist that rose up in the storm. It was like a strong acid that looked down on the 100-eyed demon's hair, hissing. This was the inspiration he had gained after his duel with the bartender. Huai Shi's own blood wine and metal explosives had been fused to create the culinary demon's alcohol bomb. After it had been infused with the origin substance from the Cage of Illusions, a thick mist instantly engulfed the area. A bubble of illusions covered reality, blocking all vision. However, it couldn't block the 100-eyed demon's gaze for long. After confirming that Weno had escaped, Huaishur retreated without hesitation. However, he immediately discovered countless strands of wriggling hair floating in the air amidst the storm. The hundred-eyed demon's lower stigmata, hair girl. Through the strands of hair, countless evil origin substances and curses could be stored and consumed. At this moment, the countless strands of hair actually wrapped around Huaishur's hand and began to furiously absorb his vitality. Huaishur was taken aback. He didn't feel anything. He just felt that the diameter of this water pipe was a little too small. Immediately afterwards, the strands of hair began to rapidly turn into fibers, turning into something like wood. Rot and poison began to spread. The numbness caused the strands of hair to twitch like flesh and blood. Then they quickly snapped in two. Within the fog of illusions, the hundred-eyed demon howled angrily. Then he heard the savage cries of countless iron crows. The sharp sound of metal multiplying descended from the sky. A 9-meter long machete descended from the sky. It howled with hatred. The scarlet blade instantly cut through the countless wriggling strands of hair. It ignored the strands of hair and began to absorb the origin substance from the Tier 4 Ascended Cultivator. From within the fog of illusions, a confused voice could be heard. You don't think that you're the only one who knows how to absorb, do you? That can't be right. That can't be right. Beneath the countless strands of hair, the old face stared wide-eyed, its eyes bloodshot. A Tier 4 Ascended Cultivator had actually been defeated by a Tier 3 Ascended Cultivator for so long, and had even been mocked in return. The veteran assassin from the Tomb of the Returnless was enraged. Countless strands of hair spread out from his body, and his entire body dissolved into a mass of hair monsters, waving countless tentacles about as they wrapped around the blade of illusions. Immediately afterwards, even more tentacles howled as they shot towards Huaishur. The blade of illusions instantly dissipated. Immediately afterwards, a brilliant flash of light burst forth. Chapter 772. The light from a virtuous sword exploded forth and swept across. Everywhere it passed, all of the negative origin substances sizzled under the heat of the sword. But at any moment, more hair would regrow, continuously depleting Huaishur's stamina and keeping him in place. Evil eyes continuously appeared from the hair, their cold gazes intersecting with each other like blades. With a loud boom, the abandoned buildings on both sides collapsed. Huaishur retreated step by step, but in his heart, he felt a sense of relief and realization. Fortunately, the one who came was not someone as strong as Great Azura, Everly from the Eye of Nightmares. Otherwise, he would have died here today. Just as the furious hundred-eyed demon slowly emerged from the fog of dreams, he saw a look of realization on Su Chen's face. It was as if he couldn't believe it. He muttered in disbelief, "So there are people as weak as you in the 4th tier?" In that moment of shock, the hundred-eyed ghost even suspected that he had misheard. However, when he saw the genuine look of relief on Huaishur's face, he felt an indescribable rage and indignation. Weak? He was separated by the enormous gap between the 3rd tier and the 4th tier, and he was being looked down on by a little brat who was not even a fifth of his age. "Please, you're very weak." It wasn't a humiliation, but this kind of expression and words brought about 1,000 times more anger than humiliation. Die! Countless strands of black hair shook violently, spewing out like a fountain. He had completely liberated himself from his human form, turning into a torrent of darkness that swept across the area. Wherever the wriggling black hair passed, pairs of ferocious eyes opened from the ground, the water, the broken walls, and so on. The venomous eyes stared fixedly at Huaishur, and even seeped into the mist of dreams in reverse, eroding the mist. The giant eyes opened endlessly, sealing off all of the space he could escape. From the outside to the inside, they shrank inch by inch, until Huaishur snapped his fingers. Darkness surged like a tide, rising from his shadow and turning into a door. Then it opened with a loud bang. Countless crimson rays of light appeared from within. The bloodthirsty eye. Holy! The iron light surged, and the crow tide swept out. In the blink of an eye, it was as if a 10,000-foot tide was rushing out. I almost forgot that there's such a move. Huaishir waved his hand. Instantly, the 9 rapping candle crows began to tremble. Their enormous bodies began to glow with rage, compassion, pain, and resentment. The origin substance equipment was complete. The mighty crow tide actually launched a counterattack against the 100-eyed ghost. The iron wings were like knives, breaking through the entanglement of the hair. The sharp claws and long beaks were raised, and they madly attacked the open eyes. Every time they opened an eye, another pair of eyes would be pecked blind. Every time they entangled a crow, 2 crows would break free from their bindings. Every time they killed a crow, 2 crows would leave scars in the countless opened eyes. He did not care about sacrificing himself or dying. He was almost willing to sacrifice his life in exchange for the enemy's injuries. Even if he was strangled to death by a strand of hair or pierced by an evil eye, he would still return to the dream realm in the form of origin substance. When he saw the images being transmitted from the front lines by the crow tide, he was greatly stimulated. Accompanied by a desperate shriek, countless tears of blood flowed out from the broken eyes. They were like countless crimson streams that converged together, creating a sea of blood in the midst of the torrential rain. The wriggling hair swept across the ground, and the eyes that were born after the destruction began to glow with an evil light. After hatefully repelling the crow tide's attack, an old and savage figure appeared from within the pool of blood. His eyes were covered in cracks, and they spat out a hateful light. The old man howled madly. "You're not the paperman Huaishir." "I am the paperman Huaishir." Huaishir shrugged. "It's just that. The paperman Huaishir isn't me." Behind him, within the shadows, the figure of a delicate young woman slowly appeared. The substitute, named Paperman Huaishir, opened her eyes, wielding the blade of hatred. Huaishir, on the other hand, once again pulled out the virtuous sword. 2 similar yet completely different faces looked up and smiled at the stunned 100-eyed demon. "Since we don't have to worry about exposing ourselves here, I'll use this move to play with you for a while." At that moment, the dream realm fog once again began to rise. Within the darkness of the bone-burying sanctuary, countless afterimages began to spread. The curse condensed from evil thoughts and depraved divinity. The tried and tested method of killing people was completely ineffective. When the curling hair of hatred, which was comparable to a sword, encountered an even sharper weapon, and the negative origin substance was countered by an even more mysterious and divine origin substance, the enraged 100-eyed demon discovered that his claws and fangs were completely useless. However, before he could carefully analyze the situation, the 2 incredibly strange faces had already appeared on his left and right. Unrestricted state, release. The rainwater turned into steam, rising into the air. Use step, combined with the drummer's technique, allowed the 2 weapons to perfectly coordinate with each other, creating a crisscrossing flash of light. A cross-shaped scar appeared in the air, accompanied by a shrill explosion. The old 100-eyed demon's hands trembled, and 2 cracks appeared on the expensive border relics he was holding. He could feel the incredibly strange origin substance attacking him. However, before he could react, the 2 retreating figures suddenly shot through the air. Shadow burial shuttle. In an instant, the origin substance turned into a shadow, then reappeared from within the shadow. The ferocious iron hammer spat out a violent trail of flames as Motoko leapt into the air, smashing down on the 100-eyed demon's head. Countless strands of hair formed a shield, blocking the attack. The demonic eye swept past, and a shattered figure appeared behind him. The spear of compassion had already pierced through all of the 100-eyed demon's defenses. Along with the fragrance of iris flowers, the azure-crowned dragon's time poison pierced through the 100-eyed demon's shoulder. As soon as the spear touched the demonic eye, it turned back into a shadow, dispersing under the demonic eye's gaze. After reassembling, the virtuous sword swept across the 100-eyed demon's chest. A scorching light flashed, leaving behind a charred wound. At the same time, Motoko's fury axe had already been swung towards the hundred-eyed demon's defenseless neck. The chains of sorrow condensed in the air and instantly contracted, just like the countless strands of hair that had wrapped around Huaishi's body. The chains scraped against each other, causing sparks to fly everywhere. It had locked onto the hundred-eyed demon's critical moment. The flames of fury howled as a massive wound appeared on his neck. Immediately afterwards, the axe was entangled by the strands of hair that had extended from the wound. Thousands of strands of hair, filled with malice, shot out in all directions, tearing apart the shadows that were spreading out one by one. The ground shook, then shook again. As young Master Ming's afterimage was destroyed, flashes of light appeared one after another. Explosion. Dozens of metal bombs exploded continuously. The viscous metal fuel splattered through the air, then rained down from the sky like a rain of fire. The explosion that had happened so close to the hundred-eyed demon was only slightly distracted, but by the time he came back to his senses, he discovered that two figures were standing in front of him, one behind him. Both of them were smiling at him. An instant later, the solemn hum of a chord and the sound of a torrential downpour echoed through the air. This was the result of Huaishi and Motoko's fury axe, simultaneously unleashing all of their power. After combining it with the use of origin substances, the purest form of destruction descended upon the hundred-eyed demon's body. Dual Xiang dragons. In the blink of an eye, when the metallic light dissipated, the hundred-eyed demon's body, which was riddled with holes, exploded. What flew out of the explosion was not blood, but countless mosquitoes and poisonous insects. They broke through the torrential downpour and reformed. To a fourth-tier cultivator, the destruction of their physical body could be repaired by expending a bit of origin substance. Compared to the damage to their physical body, the damage to their soul was even more unbearable. A vengeful counterattack. This time, however, after the thousands of eyes shot out in evil light, the old hundred-eyed demon's body trembled violently. He actually rose from the ground and charged into the sky, fleeing into the distance without even looking back. It was too strange. He had already been intimidated by Huaishi's endless collection of relics from the border, the hordes of hell, and that terrifying sword. He even felt the faint threat of death. He immediately made a decision to give up on this mission. He had no sense of shame at all. He actually chose to flee in front of an opponent who was far weaker than him. Unfortunately, it was too late. At the same time, Beelzebub's excited cheers could be heard from the mist of dreams. "I'll do it." After staying in the safe for almost a month, he was so touched that his eyes were brimming with tears. He could not wait to jump into Huaishi's hands and urged, "Quick, shoot him! Shoot him! Shoot him!" Unfortunately, as soon as Huaishi raised his gun, he felt the temperature in the air drop rapidly. He lowered his gun as Beelzebub screamed in pain. It seemed like he did not need to do anything. Everything else was fine, but once Lord of the Flies opened fire, the mist of dreams would not be able to cover him. "Damn you, human head dog! You'll die a horrible death." Lord of the Flies roared in anger. In the sky, countless frosty lights appeared. Miracle imprint, frost disaster. A few kilometers away, Lawrence, who had rushed over after receiving the call from the Heavenly Eye Ghost, had already rolled up his sleeves. He raised his right hand that was covered with secret arrays and reached forward. A terrifying chill spread out and completely froze the entire building. In the sky far away, the hundred-eyed ghost's movements suddenly stopped. It was as if an invisible hand had grabbed it tightly. It turned around in fear and wanted to scream, but it could not make a sound. Its body kept changing under the attack of the chill. However, no matter if it turned into strands of hair or turned into countless poisonous insects through the divinity of a foreign country, it could not escape from that miracle. It even died faster. In an instant, it turned into an ice sculpture and fell to the ground with a silent cry. After smashing the hut, it fell into the dust. The ice spread, and the chill swept over. His body quickly cracked under the frost, and the ice kept falling off. However, no matter how his flesh regenerated, the icicles that kept piercing through his body would destroy it again. The spreading frost was actually extracting his source form. The vigorous life force that Huaishur had been so troublesome to deal with had now become the raw material of the frost, killing him continuously. The strong died on their own. The hundred-eyed ghost wanted to open his evil eye again, but every time the negative source form gathered, it would be pierced by the icicles. He could not even put up a decent resistance. When he struggled and crawled out of the rubble, he saw the young man standing in front of him through his broken eye. He was looking down at him coldly. He opened his mouth and wanted to speak, but as he coughed violently, frozen blood spurted out from his lungs. "Who told you I was here?" Huaishur asked softly. "Tell me, and I'll give you a quick death." Chapter 773. A Tier 4 Venerable One had lowered himself to become an assassin, specifically targeting him, and even grasping his whereabouts. Even within the Alliance, there weren't many people like this. It's Huang Chuan's people spent money. The hundred-eyed demon coughed up sharp, blood-colored icicles as he spoke in a muffled voice. "That's a good joke. Continue." Huaishur's expression became colder and colder. He remained unmoved. Huang Chuan was a typical extreme Dao cultivator. He was narrow-minded, held grudges, was reckless, did things without any scruples, and would definitely seek revenge for the smallest grievance. If it was someone unfamiliar with him, they would definitely think that the brute had taken advantage of the chaos to make a move against him. Unfortunately, that was all just an act. Among the five elders, Huang Chuan loved to act like an unreasonable brute the most. He would pester endlessly and only take advantage of others. But in reality, he was much more calculative than anyone else. He wasn't that stupid to make a move against one of his own at a time like this, and kill a green sun rising star with a deep background from the heavenly dog mountain. When he saw that his lie had been seen through, the hundred-eyed demon fell silent for a moment. He laughed mockingly and retracted his gaze from Huaishur. Even if he wanted to say something, the tomb of the unreturnable wouldn't allow it. They were both going to die, but dying in the tomb of the unreturnable would be more painful. It would be better to die here. The origin substance stored in the infernal realm would have a chance to be reborn from the coffin. The hundred-eyed demon closed his eyes. "If you want to kill me, then kill me. Stop wasting my breath. You're still so stubborn even when you're about to die. How strange." Huaishur glanced at him one last time before retracting his gaze. "If you don't want to die quickly, then you don't want to die easily." The sound of shadows boiling could be heard. The door to the bone-burying sanctuary once again rose from the darkness. Behind the open door, countless strands of darkness that seemed to have solidified extended outwards, landing on the hundred-eyed demon's body like the hands of a child. In that instant, the old man froze in place. He turned around in disbelief. Within the darkness, there was a profound and cold divinity. It was as if it was a crack leading to the deepest part of the infernal realm. Under the watchful eyes of countless crows, the divinity that he had stolen from a foreign country actually began to tremble. Those eyes were not filled with killing intent, but an indescribable thirst. What the hell was that? His expression twisted as he struggled with all his might to resist, but it was already too late. Frost that penetrated deep into his bones kept piercing out, and his limbs were already entangled by the darkness. Bit by bit, they were pulled into the deepest depths of the darkness, never to return. Wait a minute. He tried his best to open his mouth and scream, but soon after, the darkness surged out like a fountain and swallowed him whole. It pulled his soul into an eternal dream of decay. It gradually melted, gradually disintegrated, and gradually became a part of the bone burial sanctuary. The door slammed shut and dissipated into the darkness. Finally, Lawrence descended from the sky onto the ice beam of the airframe. After landing on the ground, he was stunned for a moment and did not react. "Where is he?" "Here." Huaishur lifted his foot and kicked the corpse that was completely frozen into ice. "Dead?" Lawrence's eyes widened in disbelief. "You did it. How could you destroy the corpse so quickly? Also, how the F***CK did you kill him?" After a level 4 ascendant fused with divinity, they were no longer mortals. No matter how terrible the physical injuries were, they could be healed with Origin's substance. After the second transformation, their souls would fuse with the divinity, and they would begin to possess the characteristics of a former god. They could be seen as a demigod that once walked the human world. It was difficult to injure them with weapons. Even if they were weak and completely countered by Huaishur, there was nothing they could do at most. Huaishur's ferocious actions just now were not fatal at all. If he really wanted to kill this old man, he would have to rely on Beelzebub's judgment mode. What really hurt the hundred-eyed demon was Lawrence's miracle imprint that he had used with all his strength. He had recreated the disaster that the gods had once sent to Egypt in this very moment. As the most famous disaster recorded in the Holy Bible, the essence of the frost hailstorm disaster was the extermination of all life, cruelly destroying all life through freezing. Lawrence's role was to provide the tools to aim, as a bridge, guiding the authoritative relics in Canaan to aim here and then deliver the punishment. It wasn't surprising that such destructive power could be so exaggerated. But how had Huaishur done it? He could see that there was only an empty shell left in front of him. Not to mention the stigmata, even the soul and divinity had disappeared, as if they had been eaten clean. It was a thorough death. Tengu Mountain has this kind of ability? He couldn't believe it. If you want to make a living, you have to have some trump cards, right? Huaishur calmly waved his hand. It's just a finishing blow. It's not worth mentioning. Lawrence's face twitched. What was he doing here? He felt that even without him, this bastard could still kill the hundred-eyed demon here. This was too King ridiculous. How did you know I was attacked? Huaishur asked. A call from Sheng Tianmu, an assassin in the collection of all sins. Someone put a bounty on you. Lawrence glanced at him. You'd better be careful. Your head is worth a lot of money now, second only to Sheng Tianmu. That's too much of a compliment. What if the other bosses see it? Huaishur shrugged, not caring at all. In fact, he felt that he could be worth more. He looked up and was about to speak to Lawrence, but his movements stiffened. The crows, who were searching the inner circle of Danbo City, finally sent him some unexpected news. What's wrong? Lawrence looked at Huaishur's stiff expression. Huaishur didn't say anything. He turned around. Amidst the storm and thunder, flames constantly lit up in the distance, and loud explosions could be heard. It was clearly raining, but the ground seemed to have been set on fire. The turbulence came suddenly, and along with the storm, everything was covered. When the broken car broke through the barrier of the storm and stopped at the scene of the accident, all that could be seen was a scene of devastation. The burnt car basket emitted a pungent smell, and the blood gradually diluted under the washing of the storm. The original color could no longer be seen. The pitch-black birds folded their iron wings and landed on the power lines in the storm, quietly overlooking the scene of devastation. There was also the dying young man. It was too late. In the cold rain, his messy yellow hair stuck to his pale face, and he was on the verge of death. This was a cruel punishment for traitors. After violently breaking most of his limbs and inflicting the most terrible pain, the arteries were cut open, and he was left at the scene of the crime, where he slowly bled to death. In the storm, he tried his best to open his eyes, trying to see the blurry figure in front of him. "Boss, is that you? It's me, Ox Island." Huaishur squatted down and replied softly, "You haven't been back for a long time, so I came to find you." In a daze, Ox Island tried his best to raise his hand. It was as if he was afraid that the person in front of him was just an illusion that would disappear in the blink of an eye, which was why he tried so hard to grasp it tightly. So hard. "Boss, I didn't betray you. I didn't tell them." The man choked and coughed. He tried so hard to say what he wanted to say, but he gradually couldn't say it. He could only gasp for breath and make small sounds. "Yes, I know." Huaishur nodded. He held his hand tightly and said solemnly, "I'm fine, Ox Island, because you protected me." In the silence, Ox Island froze for a moment. A smile appeared on his pale face. He smiled. It was as if he had one. There was no more sound. Only Huaishur held his hand, feeling the last of his warmth disappear in the storm. There was no cure. Even Iron Crow's origin substance couldn't restore his scattered consciousness. He was already dead. Perhaps he should have died a long time ago. With such severe injuries and the loss of so much of his life force should have disappeared along with the blood and the rain. The only reason he was still here was because he still had something to say to Su-chan. After speaking, he left. He wasn't willing to stay for even a moment longer. Huaishir lowered his head and looked at the thing that Ox Island was holding tightly in his hand. He could only vaguely make out a few words on the piece of paper that had been soaked in blood and rain. Huaishir had once said to Thousand Leaves and Dragon 2, "Even if I can save one, it's worth it." But now, he couldn't even save the person in front of him. Until the very last moment, the person he was supposed to save had done everything he could to protect himself, even if he had to sacrifice his life. Only because Huaishir had praised his innate talent, praised his talents, spent some time on him, and taught him some Latin that he couldn't use, that was all. "I'm sorry, Ox Island," he said softly. He apologized softly. "I lied to you. Even if you don't need me, you will definitely become a better person. Even if you don't sacrifice your own life, you will still have a bright future." In the silence, Huaishir carefully unfolded the piece of paper and looked at the words written on it. "Considerat Astra. Sleep, my friend." Before he left, Huaishir turned around one last time and offered up a prayer. "May you pass through this path and reach the stars." Huang Chuan's residence. It was clearly raining cats and dogs, but everything was enveloped in an endless sea of flames. It was impossible to tell if it was blood or fire. His lungs twitched, but he didn't know if it was the smell of blood or the smoke that was too pungent. A loud noise came from the distance. It wasn't just a cry, but also a roar from the flames. Huang Chuan roared angrily. He raised the gun in his hand and shot the people who had charged into the courtyard one by one. In the end, the gun in his hand vibrated and let out a hollow click. There were no more bullets. He froze for a moment, then began to laugh mockingly in the rain, laughing at himself. He had always prided himself on his intelligence, but he had never imagined that he would be betrayed overnight. "Surrender, Patriarch." The traders outside the door slowly walked in and pulled out the weapons in their hands. "We have been masters and followers for so many years. I hope we can part on good terms." "Part on good terms." Huang Chuan froze for a moment. He couldn't help but sneer and spit on the ground. "Brat, didn't your former team leader tell you? There's only one way out, and that is death." He grinned and sneered disdainfully. "Come, take my head." After a short silence, the subordinate nodded regretfully and pulled out the short knife at his waist. "Then, please forgive my rudeness." 5 minutes later, the head of the Huang Chuan family was put into a box. He died ferociously without any fear or weakness. The attackers cruelly killed all the survivors in the house, then poured gasoline and burned everything to the ground before leaving. The fire burned through the night. Die! Under the heavy rain, Akasaki Makoto roared angrily and raised his arms. His whole body was like steel. He endured dozens of assault rifles in front of him and rushed through the long distance. He raised his hand and punched with all his strength. The head of a gunman exploded into a pile of mush, followed by the second, the third, the fourth. In less than half a minute, those who blocked the way were all smashed by the iron fist. "Madame Yuriko! Madame Yuriko, where are you?" He didn't have time to check the wound on his abdomen. He staggered forward and pushed open the last door with all his might. Then he saw countless splashes of blood. All the attackers had died without an intact body. And in the center of the meeting room, Yuriko Luoha turned her head. She held a heavy katana in her hand and was panting slightly. Her cold face was dyed red with blood. She was cold and solemn. Only at this time could people remember that the reason why she was elected as the patriarch was not because of her beautiful appearance, but because she was brave and strong, not inferior to men. After her husband, the previous patriarch, died young, she became the ghost wife of the Luoha family. "Is it Akasaki?" She waved her hand indifferently. "I'm fine, just some small things." Akasaki bowed and apologized. "I came late. Please forgive me." "Don't waste time, Akasaki. Let's go. There's still many things to do." Yuriko listened to the fierce gunshots outside. She turned around and ordered the strong women who kept coming out of the secret door behind her. Everyone, prepare to fight the enemy. Chapter 774. In the dead silent operating room, there was only the low sound of the hemostatic forceps and scalpel colliding. With the turbid breathing under the oxygen mask, the shadowless light flickered slightly. Even though it had been washed with disinfectant many times, there was still a faint moldy smell in the air. The operation was carried out in such a bad condition. The surgeon calmly sutured the flesh under his hand, letting the dust on the ceiling rustle down. When the last needle was done, he put down the tools in his hand, took a few steps back, and sighed tiredly. Dr. Shuncheng, thank you for your hard work. The assistant, who had only studied nursing for 2 years, took off the gloves and protective clothing for him, deeply admiring his sacrifice and efforts over the past few days. It's not a very difficult operation, just a long process. I hope he can survive. Dr. Shun Chung glanced at the child on the operating table and said calmly, the patient's care will be handed over to you. As for the medicine, I'll contact someone to send a batch of antibiotics as soon as possible. After politely greeting the others, he turned to leave. The nurse worriedly persuaded him, Mr. Shun Chung, it's not safe on the streets recently. My house is nearby. After the ward round later, would you like to rest at my house for a night? No need. There's a bed in the office. I'll make do. Dr. Shun Chung smiled. Later, I have to meet an old friend. Then be careful on the way. I will. Shun Chung walked to his office and sorted out the patient's files. After carefully checking the current storage of medicine, he rested for a few minutes, picked up a pen and notebook, and hurriedly began the routine inspection and ward round. The so-called ward was nothing more than a floor that had been specially partitioned off for the patients. On the second floor of this dilapidated theater, which had been reluctantly converted into a hospital, the huge space was carelessly drawn and covered. Under the dim yellow light, the cracks on the walls had not been repaired in time. Even with the windows open, the fan blowing wind, and the cooling of the earth air conditioner, it was still stuffy and made people want to sweat. The smell of decay lingered in the air. Between the beds separated by the tattered curtains, Shunsheng lowered his head to check the condition of the patients and carefully recorded the data. Some of the patients had already fallen into a deep sleep, while others were half awake. Under the torment of the illness, their eyes were glazed over. Only under the stimulation of the flashlight would his pupils subconsciously contract. The hot air was filled with hoarse moans and dreamy cries. Shun Chung examined the patients one by one and walked forward silently. After a long time, he suddenly stopped. In the silence, he suddenly lowered his head and looked between the two beds. Under the illumination of the flashlight, a thin thread slowly appeared. Shun Chung adjusted his glasses and sighed softly. A tripwire grenade, he said. How despicable, you Dongri. This is a hospital ward. In order to kill me, you don't even care about the lives of other innocent people? Ward? Someone laughed. In the dark corner, Yu Dongri raised his face and asked softly, don't you know better than me whether this is a ward or a laboratory? At that moment, the sound of electricity suddenly rang out in the air. It spread out from Yu Dongri's hand, instantly tearing apart all disguises. Under the spread and shroud of the electric field, everything in the room was like the surface of water, rippling under the impact of the ripples. Something seemed to have changed, but it also seemed to have not. The scene in the ward, the groans of pain, and the murmurs of nightmares were the same as before. But everything had become completely different. Just behind the hanging tattered curtains on the hospital bed, under the deformed skin of the patients, there was something wriggling faintly, and the limbs under the bedding were slightly undulating in an abnormal posture. It was like a wriggling snake nest. Under the thin human skin, everything had already changed. Under the erosion and interference of the power, this place was already in hell. Accompanied by Yu Dongri's words, in the night outside the window, there was a loud roar through the heavy rain, and burning flames continued to appear. The whole world seemed to be enveloped in a rain of fire in an instant. Only the cries of pain were the same as before. Is this what you want to do? Shun Cheng's future? Yu Dongri asked. Transform the patients in the name of saving, and take revenge on your compatriots under the pretext of curing them. Compared to the fatal tumors and lesions, surgery is just a temporary pain. You seem to have never understood this principle. Shun Cheng replied calmly. On the operating table, if you are not decisive, you will only consign the patient to eternal damnation. If the heart can't beat, a cardiac stimulant will be injected. If the body rots, it will be removed. Everything is for the ultimate cure. This is your surgery? Yu Dongri was amused. I don't even see where the anesthesiologist is. Could it be that the inner circle of Danbois? No, all the mixed breeds have not been anesthetized enough. They are befuddled, and there is no tomorrow. Day after day, they sink into the darkness of the lowest level. They struggle hard but can't break free from the quagmire. They can only choose the path of self-destruction. Without enough pain, they can't open their eyes and make their hearts beat again. This is just a trivial price to pay. It's the same old shock therapy. Don't you guys find it tiring to carry a bag of rice up and down the stairs repeatedly? Yu Dongri sneered and looked around. It seems that you have really prepared a good place. Which kind person helped you set up such a big business in the inner circle of Danbois? It's a business secret. Shun Cheng's future asked softly. Why are you still standing there, Yu Dongri? Are you still waiting for something? If it was in the past, you would have already rushed over to cut off my head, right? Yu Dongri smiled indifferently. Just you? I can't lift my spirits. Where's the big shot behind you? Or do you feel that you have grown up and want to break away from your parents' embrace and soar impatiently? The more he is not here, the more he has his own work and his own mission. Shun Cheng's future shook his head slowly, and his eyes became playful. Why are you so obsessed with it, Yu Dongri? Aren't you here for me? I know you, Yu Dongri. If you wanted to kill me, you wouldn't talk so much nonsense. But why are you waiting for so long? Isn't the hope of saving the inner circle of Danbois right in front of you? You just need to kill me. Or do you have another purpose? He paused for a moment and revealed a mocking smile. Yu Dongri, are you really as dignified as you say you are? Did you come back here for the inner circle of Danbois or for yourself? Question. In the silence, Yu Dongri flicked the cigarette ash from his fingertips and sighed softly. You have too many questions. I don't even know which one to answer first. Then you don't have to answer. You are over there and I am here. This is already the best result. Shun Cheng's future slowly spread out his hands amidst the wails and groans around him. He softly declared, Come, kill me, or I will kill you. Following his words, mournful screams burst forth. On both sides of Yu Dongri, the deformed flesh behind the curtains exploded in an instant. Sharp limbs tore through the rotten skin. Meticulously bred mutants were born from the containers. They impatiently tore apart the rags in front of them and pounced on the flesh and blood close at hand. Without the assistance of the mirror realm, this place had long since become the rancher's fasting circle. Now, after a long period of nurturing, his children had descended upon this chaotic land. There was a moment. Yu Dongri exhaled smoke from the corner of his mouth and laughed softly. I thought you were going to reason with me. Under the pitch-black raincoat, two cold rays of iron light streaked out and were held in both of his hands. He took a deep breath, and the cigarette at the corner of his mouth lit up with a wisp of blazing light. At that moment, the iron light crisscrossed in the air and easily cut through the twisted limbs and monsters. Fishy blood sprayed out. It was difficult to describe whether the one standing there at that moment was a person, an invisible ghost, or something even more terrifying and sinister. Yu Dongri stepped forward, stepping on the viscous black blood. Under the cover of the raincoat, his face couldn't be seen clearly. Only the flickering light of the cigarette appeared in the air. It was so fleeting, it seemed to be weightless. Continuous hissing sounds burst out with the explosion of flesh, and what responded to them were grenades and explosives that were casually thrown out. The violent roar suddenly burst out in this space that wasn't too narrow, setting off layers of airwaves. In the scorching hot wind, the ghost moved forward. The iron light in his hand crisscrossed and burst out with a shrill howl. A huge deformed spider suddenly pounced from behind. Then, in midair, its huge limbs had been torn apart. The iron light was like a bird, spreading its wings and flying in this narrow space. It was like the cruelest and coldest dance in the world. Death also seemed to have become an art. As the figure slowly moved forward, it quickly spread. As the ceiling shattered, a giant snake extended out from the crack, followed by a burst of iron light that spanned a long distance, sealing the venom and the blade that had not been spat out into the snake's open throat. The hilt of the blade was hot and vibrating, spewing out a ray of scarlet light and bursting out. The standard throwing knife. The assassination equipment that the Dark Army was most skilled and proficient and was a must-have for soldiers who couldn't see the light of day to carry out extermination missions. But no one had ever been able to use every inch of its blade so perfectly to cause such terrible damage. When the surging monsters became a tide, the figure that moved forward step by step was like a reef. It didn't dodge or retreat. It just moved forward step by step. Under the pitch-black raincoat, there seemed to be endless sharp weapons hidden. Whether it was a knife, an explosive, a pistol, or a dagger, everything was perfectly controlled by his 10 fingers. The future of Divine Citadel stared indifferently at the scene of slaughter, retreating step by step, always maintaining a safe distance. But in the midst of the monster's strangulation, a heavy cookery knife came whistling and cut a shrill wound on his face. Then, the black raincoat broke through the blood that filled the air. Like a dark cloud, it wandered between the walls and the ceiling at an incredible speed, and its trajectory was hard to follow. The future of Divine Citadel retreated again, pressing his palm on the bed. Behind the curtain, the deformed teenager who had just finished the operation suddenly twitched. His limbs turned, and he crawled on the ceiling. He opened his mouth full of sharp teeth and bit at Yudongri. The next moment, his head flew in the air. It was pitifully weak. The future of Divine Citadel was already close at hand. A high-pitched gunshot burst forth. Before he could even react, Divine Citadel was sent flying by the impact of the shotgun. He leaned against the wall, blood splattering everywhere. A layer of deathly gray quickly appeared on his face. This time it was the curse. In Yudongri's hands, the shotgun that had completed its mission collapsed inch by inch. This was a numbered curse bullet that he had plundered from the reserves of the Astronomical Association's technical department before he escaped from prison. It was an artificial relic that could cause damage to the ruler, and a curse that would kill anyone who touched it in the present world. No matter how many clones there were, no matter how many illusions there were, Divine Citadel would inevitably usher in death. But, unfortunately, this trick has already been used, Yudongri. In the silence, Divine Citadel sighed softly, as if it was a pity. Under the torn shirt was a body covered in stitches. In order to guard against the attack of the curse, he had already modified the body he was using layer by layer, replacing the organs and limbs from the black market. Just like the ship of Theseus, there was no part of him that belonged to himself. More importantly, you've just killed another innocent person, Yudongri. Divine Citadel smiled mockingly in the future, allowing most of the body to turn into ashes. From the beginning, this body did not belong to him. It was just a dying hybrid that could be seen everywhere in the inner circle of Donbua. In order to resist the corrosion of the cursed bullet to the greatest extent, Divine Citadel did not even erase the original consciousness. An artificial chimera. In the consciousness, he chose one of the 52 bloodlines and the source of the organs. The target of the curse bullet was mixed up. When the most serious price was paid by another consciousness, the remaining violent toxicity was no longer a problem. It was enough for him to calmly withdraw and cut off his relationship with another body. At the same time, a sharp cry sounded from outside the door. The middle-aged woman, holding a bowl of hot soup, stood at the door in a daze. The scene in front of her was unbelievable, and she could not accept the head that had rolled to her feet. Her child. with the appearance of a young boy remaining. The lips of the head opened and closed, calling softly from the pool of blood, "Mother!" The soup bowl fell to the ground. "Child, my child." The woman lowered her head in a daze, murmuring something over and over again. Finally, she let out a shrill cry. The shriveled limbs rapidly expanded, accompanied by a shrill cry. The consciousness that had fallen into the abyss was once again formed with a large amount of precipitation. The hideous limbs tore through the skin, and an astonishingly huge body continuously drilled out. The real monster was completed in an instant. The terrifying giant mouth opened, and countless sharp teeth rubbed against each other like scales, bursting into sparks and swallowing Udongri. Then it began to twitch violently, feeling the pain from within the shell. There was a blazing light erupting from the narrow darkness. The alchemy array carved into the bones was activated, and the blessed sigil lit up, summoning the purification of the Holy Spirit. The huge monster stiffened in place, solidifying inch by inch, and quickly collapsing. It turned into fine dust. Yu Dongri had disappeared. Only a pitch-black raincoat fell from the dust, accompanied by a faint dripping sound. The expression of the future of the divine city stiffened for a moment. He propped up his broken body, lifted a corner of the raincoat, and saw the timer below that was gradually falling to 0. Fisk, he made a sound of displeasure. Then, the flames of the alchemy explosives engulfed everything, shrouding the entire hospital and turning all the sins into ashes. In the deepest part of the darkness, the future of a divine city opened his eyes again from the petri dish. Outside the petri dish, under the black cloak, the skinny Yasukami raised his empty face, as if he was looking at his miserable appearance. In the petri dish, the rapidly growing embryo had reached the age of 13 years old. "I told you, Divine City, you won't succeed this time. You will only destroy the test subject in vain, and let him be vigilant. It doesn't matter. Anyway, there is no need for a test subject." Through the thick petri dish, the dull voice of the Divine City came. Feeling the power contained in this new body, he grinned and smiled. The law of the immortal beast is about to be completed. Soon, he would bid farewell to death. Eternity was close at hand. In the distance, on the burning ground, sorrowful cries resounded. Chapter 775. The day before the temporary meeting of the 5 permanent leaders, it was just past midnight, the first hour of the peace order. The chaos in the Dambwa inner circle began in the heavy rain. As if they had already formed an alliance, the Iron King faction and the K Society chose to attack from the north and south at the same time, instantly breaking through the hybrid alliance's defense line. The war began. However, their defeat had come earlier than they had expected, and even faster. It was even harder for them to accept. Kashiwabra Hospital. Under the heavy rain, the flames were gradually extinguished, and only thick smoke spread slowly. Sheng Tengmu held an umbrella and silently stared at the collapsed building, as well as the corpses of the attackers. The corpses of the Russian Federation and Ingzhou people were pulled up by the silent hybrids and thrown into the places where the flames were still burning, skipping the funeral parlor process. They were buried in peace. The chaos and attacks just now had ended, and now only the ruins and the roar of the rain remained. Another explosion. Sheng Tengmu scratched his bald head and couldn't help but sigh. "I'm really fated with explosions. How many times has it been?" No one replied. Behind him, his silent subordinates were all injured, and many of them had been moved under the canopy where the rain couldn't reach and covered with white cloth. To kill Sheng Tengmu, the Iron King faction and the Russian Federation had sent out all their elites. Sheng Tengmu had already expected and prepared for this, but he didn't expect this day to come so suddenly and so fiercely. Before the outcome was decided, the wolf and the tiger did not fight to the death. Instead, they joined hands and wanted to bite the fox that was only trying to survive. There was no need to ask why. Since it had already happened, then according to the rules of the extreme Tao, the only path left was to fight to the death. Is there any news about the others? Tengmu turned around and asked. There's no news from the Chiba family, and Ms. Laha is fine, but the Arakawa family. Tian was silent for a moment, then said in a muffled voice, They're gone. What about Mr. Takamoto? Tengmu asked about the whereabouts of the other spear-wielding guardian. Tian was silent for a moment. He's probably dead. How pitiful. I clearly made so many preparations, but I was still caught off guard. The old man lowered his head and coughed violently. The bandages on his shoulders and arms were soaked by the rain, and blood was seeping out. The old chauffeur, who had been with him for many years, returned. He wiped the blood off his hands and said in a deep voice, Master, the rescue team has arrived. Now that the family is safe, for your safety, please temporarily move. For the sake of safety, it's safer to escape as far as possible. Dongsha, Shinlo, Australia. Can't you run to a ship? Sheng Tianmu shook his head. Let's go to the headquarters. He said, we have to let those people know where to go to exchange my head for the bounty. Otherwise, wouldn't everyone have come for nothing? In the silence, no one refuted. No one refuted. The chauffeur bowed respectfully and opened the door for him. Just like that, they drove into the depths of the vast fire. Under the same night sky, within the turbulent inner circle of the pill waves, rumbling could be heard from afar. The electricity had been cut off long ago, but there were still dots of light. After getting used to the unstable voltage throughout the year, everyone had the habit of preparing diesel generators. However, the lights were dim. In the office of Huaiji Commercial, Otaku was restlessly pacing back and forth in the team leader's office. Basically, he would raise his head every few minutes and ask, Where's the team leader? Is he not back yet? Yamashita said, I already said that I can't contact him. What about Shanya? Shanya should have heard from him, right? He's with the team leader. All right, you've asked so many times. Don't be so flustered, okay? It's not like you're going to fight. Yamashita replied, without raising his head. On the coffee table in front of the sofa, there was a heavy whetstone. Under the soaking of the water, a low grinding sound burst out, and the knife light was bright. He carefully and solemnly sharpened the tachi until the sharp part of the blade was blown short hair, illuminating that pair of fierce eyes. It was red and shiny. For a moment, Otaku couldn't tell whether the knife was scarier or his eyes were scarier. Don't be afraid. Anyway, whether the team leader is here or not, our job is the same. Yamashita sheathed the knife and tightened the gun belt under his suit. After thinking for a while, he took out the pistol and pushed it from the table to Otaku, telling him, just do what you need to do. Just do what you need to do. As long as you can finish what you need to do, it doesn't matter whether you live or die. If there's any news from the team leader, contact me at any time. After he fixed the walkie-talkie, he pushed the door open and left. Otaku was stunned for a long time before he realized that he had actually been forced to act tough by the bastard Yamashita. In a fit of anger, he picked up the walkie-talkie and wanted to smash it. But after pausing for a moment, he hesitated and put down the walkie-talkie. Forget it. Isn't it just waiting for news? Just wait, just wait. Otaku let out a long sigh, and his hair turned white from worry. After so many years of not killing people with a knife, he realized that he had become so weak that even he couldn't stand it anymore. In the unbearable silence, he put his hands together and could only recite Buddhist scriptures repeatedly. He prayed devoutly to the black bird dozing on the shelf, the legendary divine bird crow that conveyed God's orders. He hoped that the person was fine. Relying on the border cable that had been brought in earlier, the streets outside were barely illuminated. Boxes and sundries were piled up everywhere, acting as roadblocks. Thanks to the preparations made a few days ago, the Huaiji group had already built a large number of illegal buildings in their territory. Now, it was much easier to defend. Before this, they had already repelled several attacks from outsiders. At the very least, they would have no problem holding out until dawn. However, at this critical moment, their team leader wasn't here. Everyone was suddenly at a loss. Yamashita could only try his best to look confident and dignified as a senior, patrolling everywhere and trying to appease the people as much as possible. Unfortunately, after exhausting all his words, he had little effect. He felt that the team leader coming back and moving a chair to sit on the street would be more effective than him. From time to time, they could hear the crows cry and the sound of those huge birds rising and falling, which made the extreme Tao practitioners who came and went feel a lot more at ease. Over the past few days, the people of the Huaiji group had gradually become accustomed to the wanton crow flying around their territory. Someone had asked about the origin of this group of crows. After all, they had never seen such a ridiculous crow in the present world. But basically, the extreme Tao practitioners had no culture. They just thought that it was a special species from some border and didn't think too much about it. Don't ask. If you ask, it means that the boss is awesome. Can't Bodhisattva Hachabana send down heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals to help us? Why do you want to ask so much? Those vigilant birds of prey hovered in the night sky. When they detected an abnormal intrusion, they would let out a sharp cry. Even when there were fewer people, they would swoop down and attack in groups. The reason why the Huaiji group could still maintain basic internal stability in the turmoil outside was because of their warning and support. But now, a large group of crow was gathering and circling in the south. Yamashita was stunned for a moment. He received a walkie-talkie signal from the south intersection. When he arrived, the people outside the barricade were already impatient. "Hey, hurry up!" The person speaking outside was Kirika Gumi's Ruatu. He urged irritably, "Mr. Akasaki is seriously injured and urgently needs treatment. Hurry up and call the doctor out." The extreme Tao guarding the door hesitated, not knowing whether to open the door or not. When he saw Yamashita coming, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. "I'm Yamashita Kuro. What's the matter?" "Yamashita, it's me. It's me. Have you forgotten? Kirika Gumi's Nakazuchi. We even drank together." Seeing Yamashita coming out, Kirika Gumi's Ruatu became excited. "Hurry up and help. Mr. Akasaki is seriously injured." "Where's the doctor? Where's the doctor? Mr. Akasaki can't hold on any longer." "Akasaki? Jin Chuan Kai's leader, Akasaki?" Yamashita was stunned for a moment and subconsciously became nervous. He raised his hand and wanted to move the barricade away. But after a pause, he suddenly reacted. "Wait, where's Mr. Akasaki? Why don't I see him?" Nakazuchi turned around and pointed to the car behind him. Behind the open window, a weak figure raised his hand with difficulty and waved at them. Under the light, the face was as pale as paper. "It's Mr. Akasaki." Some sharp-eyed subordinates had seen his face clearly. Yamashita took a look with binoculars and was relieved. He began to regret his suspicion. He waved his hand and ordered his subordinates to start moving the barricade. Nakazuchi was overjoyed. He walked forward and greeted him. His left hand, which was hidden behind his back, clenched excitedly. Just behind the car, in the alleys on both sides, the attackers with knives and guns in their hand began to take deep breaths, waiting for the signal. Their eyes were already burning red. They couldn't wait. But just as the atmosphere in front of them calmed down, a crow flapped its wings and landed on the roof of the car. It looked down curiously at the group of people who seemed to be no different from the attackers. It didn't understand what was going on. It cawed twice. Nakazuchi waved his hand unhappily. He wanted to chase away this overly large crow, but he was afraid of its sharp claws and long beak. He didn't dare to get too close. The crow stretched its neck to look at him. Then it lowered its neck and poked its head out from the roof of the car. It stared at the pale man in the car who was on the verge of death. In the shadows of the car, Akasaki Makoto was also looking at it. He slowly tightened his grip on the tachi in his hand. His eyes gradually became dangerous. "Caw!" The crow suddenly opened its mouth and screamed at the top of its voice. Everyone was shocked. Then, its long beak pierced through Akasaki Makoto's face. Then, before he could react, it flapped its wings and flew into the sky. It was still holding a silicone mask in its mouth. It was purely a habitual act of seizing and robbing. With a new toy in hand, it cawed excitedly in the air. But in a moment of carelessness, the toy that it had just snatched fell to the ground. It landed in front of Yamashita. In an instant, there was a dead silence. Everyone froze in their actions. Yamashita lowered his head and looked at the soft mask at his feet. He raised his head and looked at Nakazuchi, who was chatting affectionately in front of him. Nakazuchi also raised his head and looked at him. His face gradually turned pale. He subconsciously swallowed his saliva. Well, the weather has been dry recently. Akasaki's skin has been peeling quite badly, so this, I see. Yamashita nodded in realization. Then, he pulled out his sword and slashed at the smiling face. He roared angrily. Dog traitor. Chapter 776. Changes were always unexpected. First, the imposter had exposed himself. Before anyone could react, the foot of the mountain was already unwilling to be long-winded. He struck first and gained the upper hand. With a backhand swing of his sword, he cut off the head of this bastard. Blood splashed 5 steps. It can only be said that this group of Jiedao was too serious. They were all aiming for the neck of others. If they could cut off a head, they would definitely not be long-winded. Until the foot of the mountain kicked Zhong Ziqiao's head away like a rubber ball. He raised his sword and roared. The attacker, who was pretending to be a harmless ally, didn't even have time to react. Only the imposter, who had lost his silicone mask, kicked the car door open in anger. F*CK, these bastards. Yamashita instinctively touched his ribs, wanted to shoot the dog, but he touched nothing. Only then did he realize that he had already given the pistol to Otakashi. In anger, he did not even care about the gun. He directly swung the knife in his hand and threw it at the roaring face. The screams of the crows echoed in his ears, causing his mind to be in a trance for a moment. But when he reacted, it seemed that endless power emerged from his body. With the rapid trembling of the shadow under his feet, like a crow spreading its ferocious wings, the knife in his hand actually made a roar. The iron light whistled, circled, and rushed straight into his mouth, coming out from the back of his neck. Then, the vast flock of crows wandering in the sky had already overturned like a tide. The people hiding in the dark alleys on both sides had just come out when they saw countless birds rushing toward their faces. The members of the Huai Chi group had already crossed the fence and rushed out from behind the roadblock. With the cooperation of the crows, they fought with the attackers. Nakajima, that trash, failed. In the distance, the Russian Federation people holding binoculars spat out thick phlegm and disdainfully scolded. Andriusha, I'll leave it to you. It should have been like this. The burly man sitting on the cement block raised his hand, wiped his beard, and threw the empty bottle to the ground. The sound of steel rubbing against each other burst out from under his slightly cumbersome and bloated coat. His boots echoed as he stepped on the ground. At the end of the long street, the man named Andre put on an old-fashioned football helmet, bent down slightly, and assumed a sprinting posture. Immediately after, a loud bang was heard. It was as if a rhinoceros was galloping on the ground. The heavy echo spread into the distance. Amidst the rumbling, cracks once again appeared on the road that had been in disrepair for a long time. Andre, on the other hand, had already rushed into the crossroads like a truck loaded with goods. He didn't stop at all as he braved the bullets from behind the bunker and the attacks from the crows in the sky, charging straight ahead. His speed became faster and faster. It's crashing into us. Before the panicked warning could spread out, a loud bang followed. Under Andre's charge, the roadblocks, bunkers, and even the heavy cement blocks were all crushed into pieces. It was as easy as crushing dry weeds. Just behind him, the Russian Federation gang members who had lost their patience jumped down from the rampaging truck and swarmed in. They raised the assault rifles in their hands and began to shoot randomly in all directions. They didn't even care about the safety of the original Russian Federation army. At the very front, Andre opened his arms and let the guns around him shoot at him. He grinned and revealed a thick piece of iron under his broken coat. It was a genuine bulletproof iron suit. The terrifying defense achieved purely by relying on the weight of the suit, together with the strength-type sublimata, turned him into a human-shaped tank, rampaging through everything. Other than some of the vital parts of his face that needed to be blocked, he didn't need to care about anything else. Ever since he lost his job as an athlete because of his sublimator, Andre's favorite thing now was to let his opponents have a taste of the impact of a professional football player. When he bent down and began to charge, the ground would begin to tremble violently. After smashing through several walls, he laughed excitedly amidst the blood splattering everywhere. The coat on his body had already begun to burn, and the iron suit had already been burned into a fiery red color, rising with a raging iron light. Everywhere he went, flames would spread out. "Come on, coward! Come on!" In the midst of his drunkenness, Andre roared, "Fight with me!" In the chaotic battle, Yamashita angrily glared at the bastards who defected to the enemy. "You traitors, you actually defected to the Russian Federation? Yeah, what else could it be?" Hirakawa, Gumi's Rua, Zhong, Nishikawa spat in disdain. "Like your leader who died without a complete corpse?" Yamashita was stunned for a moment and didn't react. "Don't tell me you still don't know." Nishikawa mockingly laughed strangely. Huai Kijin offended the leader of the K faction. The K faction came to Donbua Inner Circle, and the first person they wanted to kill was him. Even the Iron King faction wanted him dead. Not only did they specially invite experts from outside, but the sublimators from both sides also participated in the hunt. I'm afraid not even his ashes are left now. Shut up. In an instant, an uncontrollable anger rose from Yamashita's chest, almost like a flame that was about to ignite him. Then he saw real flames emerging from his hands. However, he couldn't care less about that. Amidst this sudden fury, Yamashita roared. The tachi in his hand began to glow with a burning color. The anger that had condensed into a solid form filled the blade, giving it the power of a heavy axe. Blood splattered everywhere as he attacked with hatred. When Yamashita came back to his senses, he discovered that he had actually split his opponent in half along with his weapon. He lowered his head and stared in disbelief at the fiery red blade in his hand. He turned around and looked at the crow, who had landed on his shoulder at some unknown time. The crow cried out excitedly and flapped its wings, urging him not to waste any more time and to once again throw himself into the slaughter. An unending stream of anger flowed out from those scarlet eyes, along with the origin substance. The bird that had delivered the god's imperial decree had returned to the mortal world, once again sending down a miracle in power. Holy! Yamashita held the burning anger in his hand and unconsciously let out a roar amidst the indescribable fervor. Similar roars rose and fell in succession. In this turbulent darkness, countless origin substances rose from the bodies of the members of the Huai Kaigi group. Under the cover of the flock of crows, a powerful force suddenly entered their bodies, continuously extracting their anger, pain, and resentment, giving them a ferocious appearance. Then it created death. "What is that?" In the distance, Alexis raised his binoculars and was stunned. It was hard to imagine that the Huai Kaigi group had so many ascendants hidden in the dark. It was impossible to count. 70? 80? Or even more? How could there be so many? Wasn't the Pocket Paper group just a bunch of trash that had been formed less than a month ago by relying on the Pocket Paper people to put it together? How could there be so many ascendants? And there was also the increasing number of crows. In that moment, his heart suddenly contracted. Cold sweat dripped from his forehead as he froze in place. He could feel the sound coming from afar. It was as if there was a giant heart slowly beating in the depths of the darkness, emitting a faint rumble of thunder. A huge amount of origin substance gushed out from the heart, spreading in all directions like fresh blood. It contained pain, despair, and ferociousness. In the office of the Huai Kaigi group, Odama looked up in shock at the birdcage that suddenly opened on the table. Endless darkness gushed out from it, spreading and sweeping. The young master of life's divinity was operating, and a miracle was happening. Or rather, a disaster. The decaying dream slowly rose from the darkness, opening a gap along with the bone burial ground. The giant birds chirped excitedly, shaking off their mortal feathers. Iron light transformed from their wings, revealing a ferocious mechanical appearance. The lair that led to hell was opened. In that moment, a large flock descended. The moment the only restraint was released, the circling crow tide shone with a mournful iron light. Sparks burst out amidst the countless sounds of metal rubbing against each other. The mechanical crows spread their wings. Angry flames, hateful blood, and painful darkness alternated. It was time to hunt. The surging darkness swallowed all the lights, replacing them with the bloody eyes of the members of the Huai Kaigi group and an increasingly ferocious aura. The power of the spirits descended here, even if it was given to only a few people. In an instant, the advantage that the Russian Federation had created through a large number of firearms was destroyed by the monster-like power. In the midst of running, Andrei suddenly turned around, only to find that he had sunk into the deepest darkness. He couldn't help but roar. "Coward, come out and face me." No longer caring about his surroundings, the bear-like sublimator unleashed his strongest firepower, charging towards the dancing shadows in the darkness. But no matter how far he rushed, how many walls he broke, how many shadows he tore apart, he couldn't touch any enemy. It was as if he had been thrown into the most desperate confinement room, isolated forever. Only the crows in the sky looked down mockingly, coldly staring at the flames on the canned food extinguishing bit by bit, waiting for the best time to enjoy the taste. Let cool, eat it slowly. At the outermost periphery, at the edge of the sinister darkness, Alexis' face was pale, and he couldn't help but take a step back, and then another. Cold sweat seeped from his forehead, and he panted heavily. When the eyes in the darkness looked in his direction, he felt as if he had been thrown into the deep sea, and he felt an indescribable sense of suffocation. The stigmata wailed. Even his soul felt like it was being devoured by the darkness. The indescribable horror eroded his mind, and his heart twitched. It's the hordes of hell. Those nouns that only appeared in the mouths of explorers, synonymous with terror and despair, suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. They had broken into the hordes of hell's lair. The binoculars fell from Alexis' hands, and he leaned against the wall, unable to control his desire to escape. In the silence, only the flickering flames next to him flickered. His handsome face was illuminated by the flames, and he looked like a ferocious demon. He looked down quietly. It was as if he had just gone through a long journey, but he didn't look tired at all. His clothes were riddled with bullet holes, and they had long been dyed a dull grayish red by the rain and blood. "Do you need help calling an ambulance?" The man smiled and asked with concern. "You don't look too well." Alexis turned his head around, and before he could react, he let out a scream and quickly backed away. He pulled out a gun from his pocket, pointed it at the man's face, and was about to pull the trigger. But when the man looked at him with eyes as deep as the abyss, his finger froze on the trigger. He lost all his strength. You. He tried to speak, but no sound came out of his throat. Behind the man, the darkness seemed to be dancing. Pairs of scarlet eyes slowly appeared, and they looked like the hungry grins of demons. They stared at Alexis' face and took away his last bit of courage. The man's will was completely torn apart. "God, forgive me," Alexis murmured. Alexei murmured in a daze. He suddenly turned the muzzle to his chin and pulled the trigger with all his strength. Bang! In the sudden darkness, the ferocious eyes finally disappeared. Alexis closed his eyes peacefully. It was finally over. It didn't take long for the long-planned attack on Huaishur Group to come to an end. The streets were almost dyed red with blood, and in the mess, there were corpses everywhere. Only the crows were jumping up and down excitedly, absorbing the aura of death floating in the air and letting it flow into the sacred burial ground. In the seemingly eternal darkness, death was gradually gathering. There were even more deaths occurring in this land. Huaishur raised her head and looked at the area around her. The entire inner circle of the pill wave was filled with burning flames. Everything had been violently swept into this turmoil. How is this possible? The man at the foot of the mountain came back to his senses and noticed the chaos in other places. He couldn't believe it. This is the heart of the Alliance. How could it be attacked here? It's simple, Weno. Huaisher looked up and stared at the rising flames in the distance. There are two possibilities. Either the Alliance is completely vulnerable and is on the verge of destruction. He paused for a moment and said coldly, or someone betrayed us. This was not an external invasion, but internal strife. Someone took advantage of this opportunity to raise the flag of rebellion. This was what Huaisher felt was the most ridiculous. The traitor who rebelled was not him. At the same time, in the Alliance headquarters that was heavily surrounded, Sensei stared at the rebels at the bottom of the stairs. In the end, his disappointed gaze fell on an incomparably familiar face. "Why do you have to do this, Chiba-kun?" he asked softly. "Is it because I didn't give you enough?" Surrounded by the rebels, Chiba-kun shook his head with a smile and didn't answer. Chapter 777. Was there something wrong with saying that he was loyal to extreme Tao? In this country where betrayal had become a tradition, and there were so many rebellions that they could be sold off wholesale, was there a need for loyalty to exist in the underworld that had already abandoned morality? When Sheng Tianmu asked this question, Thousand Leaves Ruji wanted to laugh. He was too lazy to answer such a meaningless question. "I see. If you're not betraying with outsiders, why don't you say you're declaring yourself king?" Sheng Tianmu was enlightened and asked directly, "What about Lawrence? You should be the one behind this, right? That homeless man who only knows how to smoke and drink beer every day? You should be entertaining another group of friends right now, right?" Thousand Leaves Ruji looked down at the time on his watch and said indifferently, "It's better for Green Sun not to interfere too much with the Alliance's internal affairs. Haven't you always thought so? Compared to Green Sun, I used to trust you more." Sheng Tianmu leaned on his walking stick and ignored the guns aimed at him. He asked tiredly, "Thousand Leaves Kun, I don't need to say more about how bad the situation is. You're a rational person, even better than me. You should be the hero who led everyone to resist. But what exactly are you thinking right now?" In the countless possibilities of the future, this man was willing to sacrifice himself to protect the Donbua inner circle. But now, when they should be working together, why would they fight from the inside? What was it for? Power? Money? Hatred or revenge? Sheng Tianmu raised his voice and roared. He was so angry that he wanted to tear his vocal cords apart. "Thousand Leaves Ruji, what are you doing?" Behind the rebels, Thousand Leaves Ruji lowered his head and gently wiped the blood off his sleeve. "I'm just trying to finish what I failed to do back then. Speaking of which, I was inspired by Huai Jikun. If it wasn't for his actions, I would have forgotten who I was. I should thank him. He taught me the courage to sacrifice. Even if I can save one more person, it's worth it. Thousand Leaves, you're not saving anyone. You're just destroying it." Sheng Tianmu gripped his walking stick so tightly that the veins on the back of his hand popped out. "Stop. There's still hope." "Hope? Is that useful? He's just struggling at death's door." Qian Yilonger shook his head in disdain. "You're just waiting for others to pity you. Even in your dreams, you want to have a chance to change, but you never have any chance. What you see is just a mirage. Mr. Juji Oyumi, the divine city, and now Huaiji. Everyone has been bewitched by it. We have been walking in circles in the desert, waiting for the day we die of thirst. But it is too late. Has no one ever thought of changing? Could it be that the paper effigy was the only one filled with hope? That's not right, is it? This world shouldn't be so laughable. Generations after generations of people, leaders after leaders, constantly wanted to change, constantly wanted to work hard, but then they were constantly disappointed, constantly gave up, and constantly passed down this ridiculous thing. 70 years had passed. Whether it was Kyoto's Donbua, Osaka's Puxi, America's Detroit and Norwich, Egypt's exiles, or Russian Federation Siberia, none of the hybrids could break free from this vicious circle. It's not that there are no heroes who want to change, and it's not that there are no great powers. It's that we have been abandoned by this world. Qian Yi Longer laughed mockingly, because they won't allow it. This world won't allow it. No matter how much we yearn for warmth, no matter how much we cry, no matter how much we pay to them, we are just sinful monsters. He raised his hand and unbuttoned his shirt, showing everyone the scars on his chest. It was the price of his naivety. Don't you understand? Heaven's eye. Amidst the distant rumbling, Chinya coldly declared, the human world is too cruel and too narrow. No matter how beautiful it is, there will not be a single inch of space left for us. Monsters couldn't live in the human world. Even if they weren't killed, they would die in pain. The dead silence came suddenly, because a crisp sound came from Qian Yilonger's body. Those scars slowly opened up. As blood flowed out, Qian Yilonger's vertical pupils quickly retreated. Under his long hair, the protruding bones fell off silently, and the broken skin closed up again. The once decaying hybrid had disappeared and was replaced by a brand new, cold appearance. He was freed from the contradiction between the present world and hell, and welcomed healing and freedom. It was as if a Holy Spirit had descended to the human world. An incredible miracle was displayed in front of all the enemies. Look, other than healing, we need more things. Qian Yilonger spread his arms and announced with a smile, sometimes if you want to live, you have to change this world or change yourself. Or both together. At that moment, Heaven's eye closed sadly. The gunman pulled the trigger. 4 hours ago, through the one-way glass of the laboratory, AI Ching stared indifferently at the person being observed. The person with the characteristics of a beast that Tony had personally brought out from Damwa's inner circle. The confused prostitute didn't know what was going on. She sat on the chair anxiously, subconsciously pulling the dead skin on her nails and biting her lips. All her body movements showed that she was in a state of panic. She didn't know what was going on. Beside her, the person in charge of the laboratory stared silently at the conclusion of all the testing instruments. Finally, he took off his glasses tiredly. The test results of the 6 healers you brought back are out. He was silent for a moment and said, everything is normal. This was the biggest abnormality. There were no hybrid characteristics, no complications, and they were as healthy as ordinary people. There weren't even any signs of subhealth. Every organ seemed to be fresh out of the oven, brand new. The 6 cured people had the same characteristics, from genes to blood types to DNA. They were exactly the same. Even their fingerprints were the most standard spiral shape. It was a product created from a standard template. But now, a living product was standing in front of them. She didn't know anything. She didn't even know what the situation on her body meant. She didn't even have the time to feel happy that her old illness had been cured without medicine. The person in charge said softly, other than the contraceptive pills, there is no history of taking any medicine. In the past year, she hasn't undergone any surgery. There are no traces of modification on her body. After a long silence, AI Ching nodded slowly with an expressionless face. Is there anything else? She asked. The person in charge was silent for a long time before he said softly, she is pregnant. AI Ching looked at him. Are you sure? She has normal bodily functions. Her organs haven't deteriorated or been deformed. The person in charge said, I don't think I would be wrong about this. AI Ching closed her eyes. It was an unbelievable miracle that a beast-type person could be cured without medicine. But when this miracle really happened, not a single person here could feel relaxed or happy. Instead, they felt pity for their tragic fate from the bottom of their hearts. Their rebirth relied on the laws of the beast of eternal life. From a scholar's point of view, I must admit that Kamasei is a true genius in the future. He far surpasses his teacher, Miyamoto. The person in charge sighed. Not only did he independently complete Professor Miyamoto's cell fusion technology, but he also developed a new genetic programming system based on this foundation. He re-edited the human body from the basis of DNA and finally succeeded in achieving fusion with the laws of the beast of eternal life. Such talent is rare in this world. Through the power of the beast of eternal life, the beast-type people could be cured and reborn. Not only hybrids, but all diseases in the world could be eliminated in this way, and people could return to health. It was simply a blessing. However, This blessing came from hell. This kind of experiment had already been done by someone else. Threat level. Red Book. Continuation Institute serial number. ATTX 701 Forbidden Entity. Swamp Man. Results of the experiment led to the miniature border laboratories of the 3 continuation institutes being completely abandoned and sunk into hell. All the experimenters were permanently imprisoned and sealed, and similar research was listed as a taboo and banned from then on. There were no gains at all, only tragic losses and lessons learned. The body and consciousness of an ordinary person couldn't withstand the power of the beast of eternal life. No matter how small the unit was, it couldn't withstand it no matter how many times it was weakened and iterated. No matter how small a solar flare was once it came, it would be a disaster for Earth. And the so-called cure now was just a facade. Under the appearance of a human, the essence was no different from the mimicry of the abyss creatures. Such an existence itself was the pollution of the Silver Ocean. It was a cancer-like disease, and that exceedingly exuberant, mutated life force would spread in the most direct manner. When that happens, all cells carrying the law of the beast of eternal life would replicate and spread uncontrollably, assimilating both carriers and non-carriers without them being aware of it. Contagion. Everything was done unwittingly, and no one would even know that they were ushering in a qualitative change. Everyone had been misled by the panacea that future Divine City had thrown out, wasting their time on a mess of painkillers. It never occurred to them that the way the disaster spread wasn't through drugs, but through people. The fraternity didn't exist to distribute drugs. Instead, it was to gather people and subtly spread the Swamp Man cells in future Divine City's body. But in the end, how did he obtain the beast of eternal life cells from the heavily guarded Continuation Institute? From the very beginning, no one could have imagined that he could be so crazy, nor could anyone have imagined that he could actually succeed. The only thing to be thankful for now is that future Divine City's results are still flawed due to time and equipment limitations. The technicians said, the spread of the law of the beast of eternal life is still limited to the beastly traits, and there's still quite a distance between it and normal humans and ascendants. Furthermore, it hasn't evolved to the exaggerated extent of the Swamp Man in the records, but more like the ship of Theseus that's gradually changing boards. If it's not spread through bodily fluids, it would take more than 10 hours of intimate contact to reach the minimum level of infection. Mr. Cole, this isn't a kindergarten. There's no need for gentle words to comfort each other. AI Ching turned around and looked at him expressionlessly. Just tell me the estimated number of infections. Cole was silent for a long time before answering dryly. Mr. Tony didn't bring back much data to complete an accurate assessment. My estimates aren't prepared and have no reference value. What if I need a reference? More than 2,000 people who have completed the infection, Cole answered hoarsely. There are no less than 7,000 carriers in the incubation period. Mr. Cole, you've already done your job excellently. AI Ching nodded. I'll be in charge of the following matters. Later, please cooperate with the memory seal, and we'll be able to end this unpleasant temporary conscription. Cole wanted to say something, but stopped himself and nodded slowly. Then, the sound of the door opening was heard. Madam AI Ching, I think your mission should be over. A middle-aged man who shouldn't have been there walked in from outside the door and announced coldly. His slightly thin figure wasn't stooped, but appeared abnormally tall and straight. Together with his pair of shadowy eyes, he gave off a strong sense of pressure. His white hair wasn't dyed in any way, and was simply combed to the back of his head without any concealment or disorder. Behind him, Tony, who was supposed to be on guard duty, was already pressed to the ground. He turned his head with difficulty and waved helplessly at AI Ching. Or rather, this guy didn't have any intention of resisting at all. He simply went with the flow and laid on the ground. Now, the head of the Ingzhou branch of the Command Bureau, Renee Yuxing, walked into the room and announced coldly, everything will be taken over by the Ingzhou branch. This doesn't conform to the investigation principle, does it, Your Excellency Yuxing? AI Ching was still calm, as if she wasn't surprised by his arrival at all. You and I don't have a direct command relationship. Besides, my people are already taking care of it. Isn't it a bit too hasty to come and take advantage of the situation at this time? I said, your mission is over. Renee told her indifferently. This is my jurisdiction. Everything that happens should be handed over to me. I'll explain it to the decision-making room. Next, please cooperate with the handover work. Following his words, a staff with a serious expression filed in and took control of everything in the room. Someone walked in front of her with a box and asked her to cooperate and hand over all her belongings and storage media. But AI Ching didn't move. She just looked at Renee and suddenly asked, "What if I say no?" Renee didn't say anything. The dead silence came suddenly, and the atmosphere became cold little by little. Cole stiffened in place and looked at the two blankly, not knowing what to do, until AI Ching suddenly smiled, warm and harmless. "I'm kidding. Don't be nervous." She slowly raised her hand and handed over the gun, instruments, and chips in her suit pocket. She put them one by one into the box. Finally, she put down her phone and looked at the person next to her. "Do you still want me to cooperate with the body search?" Under such a gentle gaze, the person holding the box subconsciously took a step back and shook his head. "Thank you for your cooperation, Madam AI Ching," Renee Yushing said coldly. "The Ingzhou branch has prepared a place for you to rest. At this time tomorrow, you can return to London and report your work." "I hope so." AI Ching didn't say anything more. Before leaving, she took another look at the observation room behind the one-way glass. The woman who was cured. She was like a wild cat trapped in a cage, curled up in the corner uneasily. She didn't know where she was and couldn't imagine what kind of fate was waiting for her. But she didn't resist. She let the person who walked in press her to the ground and put her in shackles. Then, she was obediently locked in a sealed isolation box. She just shed tears silently. AI Ching paused for a moment and slowly turned her head. "Mr. Yushing, no matter what your considerations are, don't you feel ashamed to hold the merits in your hands in exchange for exterminating innocent people?" Renee turned his back to her and didn't speak. He let the door close. Chapter 778. As far as the eye could see, everything was shrouded in heavy rain. But even though the ground was covered by rain, the light gray clouds were burned red by the fire. There were cries and loud noises in the distance. Huaisher stood on the messy street and stared at everything in front of him tiredly. The entire inner circle of Donbua gradually collapsed in the burning. Even if he used all his strength and released all the hells, he could only protect a few small blocks behind him. Less than 5,000 people. He could no longer take care of any more places. And now, in front of him, there were only whales left on the street after the battle. Amid the rubble and collapsed ruins, stifled cries sounded ceaselessly. "Doctor! Where's the doctor?" A woman with disheveled hair and a dirty face walked barefoot on the street, looking around blankly. She tried her best to carry her husband on her back and cried hoarsely. When she saw Huaisher, she rushed up as if she had found hope. She staggered, fell on the ground, and got up again. "Save him, please save him. Mr. Huaisher, please." She knelt on the ground, kowtowing and begging with all her might, ignoring the stones on the ground that scratched her pretty face. "I will use my whole life to repay you, Mr. Huaiji. Please, I beg you." However, the man in her arms was already dead. He had lost his breath. As she gradually lost her strength, Huaisher closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "I can't do anything." The woman froze on the spot and stared at him blankly. After a long, long time, her hopeful expression collapsed. Little by little, she bent down. She hugged her dead husband and cried in pain. "Why, I took out all my money. I could do anything. Why can't you let him go? We didn't do anything." In the end, she even lost the strength to cry. She got up numbly, carefully picked up her dead husband, kissed his cheek, and comforted him softly. "Don't be afraid. I will be with you. You will be fine soon." "Very soon," no one responded. She sobbed silently and staggered away, never turning back to look at him. Her cries were loud, but her despair was silent. Huaisher stood in the same place. He raised his head to look at the sky. A thunderous sound reverberated in the distant sky, and a pitch-black shadow quickly appeared. Amidst the low vibrations in the air, it gradually approached and cast a beam of cold light from the highest point. It illuminated the darkness where the firelight could not. It was as if the will of the heavens was looking down on this great earth full of pain. However, that light was so cold, not wavering in the slightest, only coldly looking down. Just behind the searchlights of several helicopters, photographers carrying cameras were taking pictures of the chaotic streets and the bloody conflicts from high up in the sky. The images under the camera were continuously transmitted to the studio. Behind them, Shang Ye, who was wiping the wounds on his face, suddenly had a change in expression. He snatched the phone from his subordinate's hand and said, "Boss, this is bad. Look at this." On his phone, the TV station was broadcasting the emergency news live. Captions kept scrolling on the dilapidated image of the inner circle of Donbua. However, the signal was too unstable. It was difficult to see clearly and could only be vaguely distinguished. Identity checks by the police, a large number of illegal immigrants from Donbua district, armed conflict. Even the most eye-catching riot. On the image, outside the inner circle of Donbua, a large number of poor people who were not even dressed properly were pushing and shoving with all their might, trying to escape the chaotic streets behind them. However, roadblocks had already been set up at the edge of the intersection. Fully armed police officers held up large shields and coldly forced the surging crowd to retreat. Then, they threw smoke bombs into the crowd. Under the impact of high-pressure water cannons, the surging crowd collapsed and scattered in the silence. The image suddenly went silent for a moment, and then switched back to the live broadcast. The news anchor, with a serious expression, sat up straight and said, "It is reported that the organized riot of illegal immigrants this time is led by violent and terrorist organizations. We have obtained information from the police about the mastermind." On the image, photos kept appearing one after another. Familiar faces kept appearing one after another. Sheng Tianmu, Song Jie, Qian Yilong Air, the future of God's city, and one of the last instigators of the riot. Huai Zhijin, under the illumination of the searchlights in the sky, the camera perfectly overlooked everything on the ground. Finally, it turned to the man who indifferently raised his head and looked at the sky. It was as if the camera hidden behind the searchlights could be seen through the camera. He quietly stared at the camera and slowly raised his hand. He showed his middle finger. The pitch-black birds screeched and rushed into the sky. The crow tide rose and fell, blocking the camera. The helicopter quickly shook and spun. It had no choice but to increase the altitude. The live signal was cut off. On the screen of the phone, the camera had switched back to the live broadcast. The two experts with serious expressions began to discuss the household registration system of Yingzhou and illegal immigrants. Huaishe retracted his gaze and waved his hand to signal Shangye to go back. He could not help but want to laugh. What was this? The undercover had become the leader of a gang. In order to prevent a riot, he had now become the instigator of the riot. The world was obviously so cold, but sometimes it was as absurd as a fantasy novel. In the silence, there was a sudden vibration in his arms. His phone. It was a confidential call from the Astronomy Society. It brought subtle shocks again and again, constantly reminding him. However, this was not the channel that AI Ching had originally used. Instead, it was a call from a stranger in another division. This stranger had used a higher authority to forcibly replace AI Ching's original frequency and sent a communication request. The phone vibrated again and again, and the red alert on the screen flashed. It reminded him of the seriousness of the situation. "Hello, who is this?" Huaishe picked up the phone. What answered him was a low voice that he had never heard before. It was hoarse and gloomy. "This is the head of the Yingzhou branch of the Federal Administration, Rene Yuxing." Huaishe frowned. He was not shocked by the identity of the person on the other end of the phone. Instead, he had an increasingly uneasy premonition. The head of the Yingzhou branch, the main person in charge of the Asian Decision Room of the Federal Administration in Yingzhou, had directly bypassed AI Ching and directly contacted him. A tool? This was completely out of order. Moreover, AI Ching was directly responsible for the Asian decision room of the federal administration. The two sides were not in the same system at all. Why did he contact him? Huaisher was silent for a moment and asked, "Should I call you Head Yuxing or Head Renee? It doesn't matter what you call me. I only contacted you to inform you of one thing." Renee Yuxing said, "Inspector Mr. Huaisher, I am now giving you an official order in the official name of the Yingzhou branch. Stop all actions in the inner circle of Donbua and withdraw from Yingzhou." He said, "Your mission is over." In the long silence, Huaisher was stunned on the spot. He was dumbstruck. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Exactly what it means. Stop everything you've done, cut off all ties, leave the capital, and report to the Yingzhou branch. There will be a border express to London waiting for you. You can return to the ivory tower this afternoon." Before Renee could finish, he was already interrupted by Huaisher. There was no longer any politeness and calmness on the surface. Huaisher asked coldly, "You mean you want me to wash my hands of what is happening in front of me?" "This is not something you should care about, Mr. Huaisher," Yuxing retorted. "From the beginning, this kind of interference mission that is not recorded in the Yingzhou branch and has not been approved by me is not legitimate at all. As a subordinate organization of the decision room, the Yingzhou branch does not have the right to interfere with national sovereignty." Huh? Huaisher was amused. He could barely suppress his anger and asked angrily, "Isn't it because of the Yingzhou branch's inaction that things have developed to this extent?" "Huaisher, this has nothing to do with you." Yuxing lost his patience. For the last time, Huaisher, before the Yingzhou government accuses the federal administration of interfering with sovereignty, stop all actions in the inner circle of Donbua and withdraw from Yingzhou. Huaisher's eyes turned cold bit by bit. "Sorry, Minister Yuxing. Whether it is as the former Xinhai prosecutor of Dongxia or as a teacher of the Ivory Tower Exchange Group, you don't seem to have the ability and authority to order me around." He replied coldly, "I am not your subordinate, and I don't need to care about your orders." "No, now I am," Renee Yuxing said. "5 minutes ago, AI Ching has already been suspended because of her actions and refusal to cooperate with the investigation. You have already been assigned to the Yingzhou branch. From just now until now, although I don't like your actions, I have always maintained enough restraint and politeness. I hope you don't make everyone unhappy. I don't care what you're doing in my jurisdiction, but if you ignore the warning, I have the right to arrest you for violating the rules. I hope you. Then come mess with me." Huaisher interrupted him and said word by word, "Why are you talking so much nonsense? Are you also a part-time editor?" "I am right here, Renee Yuxing. I'm not going anywhere. If you are unhappy, why don't you hold it in? Do you really think everyone will spoil you?" Trash. Without waiting for him to speak, Huaisher threw down his phone, pulled out his pistol, and pulled the trigger repeatedly. In the end, the phone's condition could no longer be seen clearly. In this short period of dead silence, all the members of the Huaisher group raised their heads in shock. They had never seen their leader so angry. He was like a wild beast wanting to kill something. The terrifying killing intent almost condensed into a solid form. But very quickly, it dissipated again. He regained his calmness again. He just turned around and ordered softly, "Take the people and let's go. Shangye, where are we going?" Shangye got up and followed. "Where we should go." Huaisher lowered his head and looked at the key left by Shengmu in his hand. He slowly clenched it. "I really can't take it anymore." The long night seemed endless. Only the fire burned and the sound of collapsing spread. Before dawn, the whole world was at its darkest. The refugees curled up in the ruins heard the low footsteps in the distance. They hid uneasily in places where the light could not reach and peeked in fear. But soon, the footsteps came closer and closer, accompanied by the sound of heavy vehicles. Under the illumination of the roof lights, everything seemed to be daytime. The dense footsteps covered the heavy rain. Wherever they passed, all the sounds of fighting disappeared in an instant. The soldiers, armed to the teeth, seemed to have gathered into a formation. They rushed straight into the inner circle of Danbo, coldly suppressing all the chaos and killed the extreme Dao people one by one. When the survivors saw the emblem of the shogunate's authority on their bodies, they were stunned and felt a sudden surprise. The general, it was the general's guards. Self-defense forces. The self-defense forces are here. In the broken house, the old survivors were overjoyed and cheered in ecstasy. We are saved. We are saved. This nightmarish night was finally over. Many people cried tears of joy, but soon they realized that something was amiss in front of them. The people who came to save them stopped, slowly turned around, and looked at their faces. The eyes behind a mask were cold and indifferent. The muzzle was slowly raised, the trigger was pulled. At this moment, outside Kyoto, in a resort hotel built in the mountains, Ai Ching sat in the luxurious suite arranged for her, expressionlessly watching the live broadcast on the TV. She stared at the host's surprised expression, and the guests in the live broadcast room breathed a sigh of relief. She did not get the slightest bit of joy from them. Instead, she did not even have the strength to snort at this stupidity. "Idiot, you still don't understand," she closed her eyes. Even if she had foreseen such a scene, she did not want to see the hypocritical smiles on the screen. Then, there was no inference to continue before the reboot. That night, on the embankment by the river, she did not finish what she said to Yu Dongri. The inference completed from Yu Dongri's own mistakes. The truth that he had never revealed to others in order to avoid too much disturbance. He was right about one thing. For the Dombwa Inner Circle, the Astronomy Society could not be trusted. The Astronomy Society had never cared about the life and death of hybrids, to be precise. Allowing this group of beastmen with abyssal traits to continue living was already a rare and precious benevolence after weighing the pros and cons. And Yu Dongri's time jump just proved one point. In the foreseeable future, the Dombwa Inner Circle would become a threat to the present realm. Beside Ai Ching's hand, the beacon jumped again. 3-3. This was the echo left on the timeline after the time jump. As time went by, the echo frozen in the future gradually came to the present and was received by the beacon, becoming proof that the Bifrost had once operated. Such an exaggerated number of time jumps could only prove one thing. There was a result that the time jump could not reverse. When thinking from this narrow point of view, the number of possibilities left becomes very small. The possibility of the Green Sun triggering a war in the present realm and the border had been overruled and could be put aside. And the Divine City's future use of Miyamoto's results combined with the power of the Eternal Beast to create the existence of the Swampmen, which confirmed her previous conjecture. But if that was the case, then there was another problem. Even if the Swampmen were the flesh of the Eternal Beast, they did not have the ability to stop Yu Dongri's time jump. The data provided by Cole, the head of the laboratory, proved that the Divine City's future research had only just been completed. If Yu Dongri wanted to stop him, there was plenty of time, but why did he not succeed? The answer was so obvious. In addition to the Eternal Beast, there was also the existence of the element of destruction. So, let's start with the simplest elimination method, based on the analysis of all the basic data at hand. Which element of destruction was most likely to appear in the Dombwa Inner Circle? The qualitative change of the primordial substance did not occur. The hybrid souls did not transform and still maintained their original appearance. And the Silver Ocean did not detect the existence of harmful memes. Then, Bushuin could be ruled out. Although extreme and distorted, there was still a stable structure of alliances among the hybrids, and most of them still retained their rationality and did not degenerate into a chaotic community. Even if it was very sick, this level was still within the normal range for the time being. The interference of the element of destruction, the Pied Piper, could be ruled out. A week ago, the gray-robed man appeared in Egypt, and his uncontrollable nature would not stop just because he was a hybrid, let alone a conspiracy, so he could also be ruled out. Then, according to the favorite method of the detectives in Bengett's detective novels, after eliminating all possibilities, the only possibility that emerged was the only one. The distorted society formed by long-term external pressure, the law of the jungle built purely by the law of the jungle. Whose favorite altar would that be? Yu Dongri was wary of the existence of the rancher. Now, in the Danhua inner circle, there was also the interference and influence of the rancher aside from the eternal beast. That was the warning that AI Qing had given to the decision-making room in her secret report. She did not fail to live up to this heavy trust and expectation. In a short half a month, through her own observation and intelligence collection, AI Qing had perfectly completed the task that the decision-making room had arranged for her. But what if she continued to infer? Apart from the confusing details, if one were to look at the overall situation of Ingzhou from a bird's-eye view, who in the entire Ingzhou had the right, the qualification, the skill, and the patience to turn the Danhua inner circle into such a situation step by step? Who had caused all of this? 3 people. The first was the head of the Ingzhou branch, Rene Yuxing. The second was the emperor who was still sitting in the imperial palace. The third was the general. When the Swamp People Syndrome appeared, AI Qing had suspected Rene, but she quickly concluded that Rene was just an incompetent bureaucrat. Perhaps in the upcoming interim meeting of the P5, he had seen that there would be a new conflict between the Border Party and the Sovereignty Party, so he chose this political speculation. But as a pure bureaucrat, Rene Yuxing might be good at pretending to be deaf and dumb, but he would never take the initiative to touch something that could doom him eternally. This was not an expectation of his integrity, but a trust in his bureaucratic instincts. Then, the Emperor of Ingzhou? Impossible, right? The weakened Ingzhou lineage would have the courage to touch the bottom line of the astronomical society, try to grasp the law of the eternal beast, and take over the power of the rancher? An emperor who longed for a resurgence would be unwise enough to collude with the elements of destruction? Even if it was weak, he still had many chips in his hands. As long as he was alive, he was the true master of the Ingzhou lineage. There was no need to stake everything. It was too stupid. He was only 14 years old. He could wait. Then, there was only one result left in the end, the former White House knight, the current Ghost Fawn. The leader of the Ingzhou Wu family, Douglas Arthur. Think about it irresponsibly. Since he was exiled to this remote island country, for 50 years, the former strongest grade 5 had endured the shackles of Ingzhou's framework and was imprisoned on this long and narrow land by the origin code of the Ingzhou lineage. He lost his freedom, gradually indulged in sensual pleasures, indulged in pleasure, and lived happier than anyone else in the world. He lived more unhappily than anyone else. Just when everyone thought that he was old, he suddenly showed his claws and teeth. In order to smash the cage, he did not hesitate to let the elements of destruction complete the fusion in the capital. Was there such a possibility? When such a conjecture emerged from his thoughts, it could no longer be ignored. If this was the truth, then the general's guard that had descended into the inner circle of the Danhua was the last straw that created the hell on earth. Now, the darkness between dawn was about to pass, but the sun had not risen. Under the gradually thinning rainstorm, the fire in the inner circle of the Danhua gradually extinguished. At the same time, the cries and whimpers disappeared without a trace. In this deathly stillness, the ferocious dogs ravaged everywhere. The massacre in the name of suppressing the riot had begun. Chapter 779. Gunshots rang out continuously on the long street. The tank's tracks crushed the wreckage on the ground as it rumbled forward. The supreme Taoists who were engaged in a chaotic battle turned around in shock. They couldn't believe what they were seeing and couldn't understand what was happening. When the gates of hell opened, hordes of evil spirits would return to the human world like this, right? They wore iron clothes, held swords in their hands, had ferocious horns on their heads, and stepped on pools of blood. They spread death. The guards who were built for war slowly walked on the street. They slowly raised the assault rifles in their hands, aimed at the targets in front of them, and pulled the trigger. Then, a hand grenade was thrown out from a raised hand. It rolled and scattered countless shrapnel amidst the loud noise. Regardless of whether it was wailing or roaring, the slaughter teams from all directions moved forward in an orderly manner, killing all the hybrids in front of them. They cruelly and accurately forced the fugitives into alleys. Then, the formation separated. The executive officer's leather boots stepped on the wreckage under his feet, and the flamethrower in his hand lit up with flames. He slowly raised it. Dazzling flames spewed out. Everything was swallowed up in the tragic screams. Then, the tanks and the formation continued to move forward, leaving only ruins behind them. In the flames, the people who were rolling and wailing gradually stopped moving. Only the flames still danced playfully. Climbing on the scorched earth, the slaughter had begun. Huaishur was already standing in front of the warehouse that had long been forgotten. The address on the key was unexpectedly close. It was right next to the territory of Huaiji Group. The dilapidated factory that no one had cared about for more than 10 years had weeds growing everywhere in the empty courtyard. Who knew how much trash had been thrown in through the fence? Sewage flowed everywhere. The barbed wire in the corner had long been cut open. Someone had even built a basketball court here. But now, the people who played basketball had long disappeared. The warm corner that was once filled with laughter had been washed into a mess by the heavy rain. Huaishur raised his hand and pulled off the broken chain on the door. He wanted to open the door, but found that the door couldn't be pulled open at all. Behind the thin door panel that had been eaten by worms was a thick layer of steel. Behind the rusty surface, there were several layers of different steel, as if they had been planted in the ground for a long time. Only the keyhole, which was covered by layers of iron plates, was still shiny and new. Is there a need to go through so much trouble? Huaishur frowned, inserted the oddly shaped key into the lock, and twisted his wrist. As a result, a low grinding sound rang out from the mezzanine behind the door. The sound continued until it turned into a loud bang. The earth trembled. Behind Huaishur, the members of the Huaiji group retreated in shock. They saw the warehouse in front of them start to shake violently, as if a giant was about to pull out its rooted feet from the ground and prop up its tired body once again. Dust flew up from the thin rain. Under the gloomy sky, a dim light lit up on the silent door. Then, under the push of Huaishur, the half-meter-thick steel door slowly opened, revealing the darkness behind. A familiar pungent smell floated in the air that had been frozen for many years. Huaishur froze in place. His eyes widened in disbelief. Right in front of him, in the huge space behind the door, lights lit up silently, illuminating every inch of the narrow aisle that was almost impossible for people to pass through, as well as the dense shelves that wanted to make use of every inch of space. And the guns on the shelves. Munitions. Munitions that filled the entire warehouse. Pistols, submachine guns, rifles, assault rifles, shotguns, sniper rifles, squad machine guns, grenades, stun grenades, landmines, explosives, and even shoulder-mounted rocket launchers that filled the entire wall. Ammunition boxes piled up like a mountain took up most of the space, and the terrifying reserves that were enough to carry out a modern war were right in front of him. In the dead silence, Huaishur was stunned. "You bastard, what did you want to do when you were young?" This was what Shang Timu told him, a little bit of a little reserve from more than 10 years ago. Did everyone have some misunderstanding about quantifiers? "Aren't you quite capable, old man?" Huaishur chuckled softly, stepped in, took a pistol from the shelf, and then carefully and seriously pressed the bullets that were smeared with maintenance oil in the magazine one by one. "What are you waiting for?" He turned back, looked at the dull faces, and smiled happily. "Get ready to deliver, everyone, just like you deliver wine. Our counterattack hasn't even begun yet." 15 minutes later, under the heavy rain, the lights of the Huaishur group's convoy lit up the dark world again. The trucks full of munitions roared and sped in all directions. They went to every organization and branch on the Alliance's registration list, with early Christmas gifts. Like beer, free weapons could not bring people joy, could not make people happy, could only kill something. It was not a necessity like water and wine, but it was the only way to survive now. Protect your family, protect your children, and protect everything that you have. Rely on yourselves. When the heavy truck broke through the fierce crossfire outside, smashed the outer wall, turned all the way, and stopped in front of Akaki, Akaki almost punched the driver's face. "Onto the mountain, you bastard!" Akaki roared angrily. We built the wall with great difficulty. What are you doing? Delivering. Behind the broken windshield, the man with bleeding forehead grinned, raised his hand and pointed to the carriage behind him. These are the gifts from the boss. The broken carriage slowly opened. In the overturned box, countless shaky bullets flowed out from the gaps, and the shiny copper light reflected on his lifeless face. Hey, where did you get these? Akaki bent down, grabbed the bullets that almost covered his feet. He was at a loss. He almost thought that he was hallucinating. Before he could react, the people behind him pushed him away. Oh, the guy from the Huaishir group did a good job. Yuriko reached out her hand with satisfaction, checked the quality of the gun, raised her head, and asked, "Where did the Huaishir group go?" Under the mountain, wiped the blood on his face, looked at the place where the fire was the strongest. The boss should have gone there, right? Men are really troublesome when they go crazy. If we can survive, we can drink together. Yuriko shook her head, pulled the bolt, and her expression became cold. What are you waiting for? Akaki, don't you know how to work? Under the mountain, you can go to the back to rest. It is safer there. Under the mountain, shook his head and smiled, rejected her kindness, just pointed to the roaring city behind him. I still have a place to go, Ms. Yuriko. He said, if it is convenient, can you ask someone to help me refuel? In a short silence, Yuriko raised her head and looked at him, and then looked at the broken truck that was a miracle. She turned back. Come, give my car to him. 10 minutes later, as the garage door opened, the fully bulletproof Hummer burst into a roar, like a monster opening its eyes. The car lights lit up with blazing light. After breaking through the fence, it rushed into the storm again, rushed into the deepest part of the storm. In the entire inner circle of Donbua, at this moment, countless vehicles, motorcycles, and even bicycles full of iron light rushed out of the door of the Huaishir group, spreading in all directions. Like a dying heart, it was difficult to beat again, to inject resistance into everything that was on the verge of death. And on the dead silent road, in front of the straight armored vehicle, the cruel car lights illuminated the figure at the end of the road and the gradually spreading blood under his feet. Stepping on the shoulder of the struggling soldier, the ferocious figure raised his head, revealing his handsome face to them. Casually, he pulled the trigger. Blood splattered everywhere, and the incomplete body no longer struggled. Is everyone okay? Huaishir raised his head, wiped the rain on his face, and smiled at the massacre team in front of him. You came from afar. Sorry for not going out to meet you. He said, next, please enjoy the warm reception of the local people. As he spoke, he threw away the assault rifle in his hand and took a grenade launcher from his back. His smile became brighter and brighter. Violence and death were the specialties of the inner circle of Donbua, and they had to be tasted. At that moment, a low muffled sound burst out from his hand, and the rain that fell on the gun rolled back, and a dark shadow had already gone against the rain of bullets, whistling out. It crashed into the tank. In an instant, Ramsey's anger erupted again from this foreign country's territory, and the alchemy fuel mixed with the source substance burst out with blazing light, swallowing everything around it. The crazily rising temperature also burned the bulletproof armor into mud, and then hot metal steam spread in all directions along with the evaporating rain and the storm, enveloping more than a dozen slayers. Then another round, a third round, a fourth round, until everything in front of them was swallowed up. Destruction befell the heads of the destroyers. In a shroud of the flames and impact, tragic screams burst out, no different from those of the dead. Only a scarlet signal flare rose into the sky and exploded, attracting attention from all directions. In the rapidly approaching roar, Huaishir lowered his head, and the forging furnace between his fingers lit up again, and brand new high-explosive bombs appeared out of thin air, one after another, and were loaded into the furnace. He raised his head again, walked in the direction of the enemy, and went to the next place. The war has begun, everyone. He looked down at the dozens and hundreds of enemies, and stared at the twitching faces under the masks, and asked softly, "Are you ready?" Chapter 780. No one responded, only the raging fire of the machine gun. But Huaishi's figure suddenly melted into the twisting rain, as if he had merged into the darkness, becoming incomparably ethereal. He pulled the trigger at the enemies who had surrounded him. Deadly grenades scattered in all directions. Metal seeds fell to the ground and bloomed into fleeting flowers of flame. The scorching wind lifted the curtain of rain, causing the hazy water vapor to disturb the space between the sky and the earth. In a loud roar, everything seemed to have become distant. The crying face and the color of blood could no longer be seen. He could deceive himself that what had happened was just a dream. He just had a nightmare occasionally and woke up early to go out for a run, but death was still rising. In this silence, the young Master Ming's sacred mark wailed silently. Huaishi pulled the trigger expressionlessly, but the crisp sound did not come from it. He pulled the trigger again, and only then did he hear the sound of the gun shattering. He looked down at the grenade launcher in his hand and saw the dent on the body of the gun from the impact of the bullet, as well as the sound of the internal parts falling off. He regretfully threw it aside and continued forward. When he passed by the few figures who were still struggling on both sides, he reached out and took out a pistol from his pocket. Bang! Bang bang! No more sounds could be heard. It was quiet. A thick fog had appeared out of nowhere and covered everything around her. Huaishi stopped in her tracks and looked around. He did not know when he had fallen deep into the hunting ground. Dead silence. Just behind him, a big hole suddenly appeared in the air. Then, the friction of the red bullet left the sound far behind. Huaishi's figure disappeared and flashed dozens of meters away. Until then, the loud sound of the anti-material sniper rifle came too late. A deep hole appeared in the ground, and gravel flew everywhere. In the surroundings, in the thin rain and fog, a dozen figures slowly appeared. At the front of Huaishi, the enchanting and graceful figure walked out of the fog. The black Ingzhou robe had been soaked by the rain, and the peony painted by Yu Chanran on it had become more and more enchanting. What a coincidence, Mr. Huaishi. The former dealer of the Empire Casino, Iza Serene, tilted her head and smiled at Huaishi. We meet again. After a long period of silence, Huaishi sighed softly. So it's really Qianye who betrayed us? No, it's actually a request from Big Boss Heaven Eye. Iza Sakura shrugged. The Waikiki group is too much of a hindrance, so they asked us to come and settle it. Well said. I almost believed you. Huaishi said, Mizusaki, could you please find a better excuse the next time you try to drive a wedge between us? Iza Serene laughed. I was just saying it casually. Wouldn't it be better if it works? Huaishi didn't laugh. He just looked at them quietly and sighed. I thought Qianye would have a bottom line. What the employer thinks has nothing to do with us. We are only responsible for carrying out orders. Following Iza Serene's words, the other murderous figures slowly approached and blocked Huaishi's escape, route inch by inch. A slender chain slowly drew out from Iza Serene's sleeve, as well as the curved and ferocious outline of a sickle. Just like that, she conveyed the employer's order to Huaishi. You're too much of a hindrance, Waikiki. We have to get rid of you here. The bounty hounds from the tomb of the returnless, ship of greed, drew their weapons and approached inch by inch, their killing intent enveloping them. There was a short silence. Huaishi was silent. He looked down at the pistol in his hand and suddenly asked, By the way, compared to your group and the Eye of Nightmare, which one is more awesome? No one responded. Iza Serene was expressionless and didn't say anything. Only the corners of her eyes were slightly raised. Compared to a colossus like the Eye of Nightmare, there were very few groups in the Tomb of the Returnless that could be compared to it. Even though the Ship of Greed was slightly famous, it still couldn't be compared to the War Legion that could even participate in the War of the Worlds. It would be better to say that it couldn't even compare to 1% of it. And Huaishi heaved a sigh of relief as if he had obtained the answer. That's good. He smiled happily and let go of the pistol. If you guys are more powerful than the Eye of Nightmare, I might not be able to kill all of you. Killing intent appeared in Iza Serene's eyes. Then he felt a chill down his spine, because the one who was faster than her was Huaishi. He was already close at hand. A long sword shrouded in brilliant flames appeared in the void. As Yu's steps advanced, It drew a straight trajectory in the wind and aimed at her neck. Sweep! It was faster than expected. It was even more terrifying than the scene she had seen and the information she had collected. Even though she was prepared, she was still shocked by this terrifying speed. She even forgot to retreat. She instinctively raised the sickle, and the slender chains crisscrossed in the air, forming a net to block in front of her. Then, in that short moment that could not even be considered an instant, it fell apart. It was sliced apart like a dried twig. The sharp blade of the sword collided with the sickle blade, and sparks flew. In that fleeting pause, she saw Huaishi's eyes. They were pitch black, like an abyss. But then, his figure disappeared from where he was. It was as if he had come without any warning. The bullet from afar brushed past Aizen's temples and shot into the ground, and the lingering sound spread out. This was the key blow that saved her. Then, the sound of blood gushing out was heard. Beside serene, the person who had yet to react froze on the spot. Your team doesn't seem to be very capable. He stepped forward, and the air behind him trembled as another hole appeared. Snipe! But this time, he had already found the direction of the bullet. He stepped forward, then pulled out the Lord of the Flies from his satchel and pulled the trigger behind him. The alchemy bullet flew through the air, creating a spark in the depths of the fog. The fifth, Huaishi counted softly. Then, the remaining 7 enemies began to surround and attack. The ground suddenly trembled, and cracks appeared. A zigzagging sword stretched out from the cracks like a shark, stabbing towards Huaishi from below. The hammer of pain appeared in Huaishi's hand, and flames burst out from its tail as it smashed down. The cracked ground suddenly soared, and countless vaporized blood spurted out from the cracks. The broken swords were deeply embedded in the ground. Serene's scythe was already coming towards him. From her sleeves, dozens of chains flew out one after another, tightly entangling Huaishi's body. Countless illusions of white snakes appeared, pulling him in the air. Then, she saw that between Huaishi's 5 fingers, the huge hammer disappeared without a trace. Then, sparks burst out, and the rope of sorrow flew out from the thick smoke. It suddenly contracted, extending upwards against the chains, and broke Iz's control. It tightened inch by inch, completely strangling the blood-soaked, white snake Shikigami into pieces. Serene looked at Huaishi in a daze, and Huaishi also looked at him. The uncontrollable scythe fell from the air into his hand. It was forcibly controlled by the hand of restraint and cut open the throat of the other one in his hand. Blood spurted out, and the sound of the head falling to the ground was so low. From the beginning to the end, that indifferent expression did not change at all, as if he was just casually uprooting the weeds on the ground and pulling out the harmful poisonous flowers. It was so calm that it was frightening. Looking at her, "The 9th one," he said. "Don't be afraid. It will be over soon." The nightmare began. Chapter 781. Soon, the 10th, the 11th, it was just a momentary shock. When Aizen's came back to her senses, there was only him and her left in front of her. Endless coldness surged from those pitch-black eyes, swallowing her up completely. She suddenly realized that this mission might really be a mistake. Now, she was sitting in front of a bet that she was bound to lose, and she couldn't find any solution. For a moment, she even wanted to violate the restrictions of the death contract and run away. She had never expected such a development and result, and had never faced such a terrifying opponent. All the attacks couldn't even surprise him for a moment. From beginning to end, he maintained a palpitating calmness and contempt. Step by step, she moved forward, toward the last enemy. This might be the last mission of the Ship of Greed. Aizen closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she had already disregarded life and death. At that moment, under the peony on the robe, a hideous skeleton appeared. The flame of the burning source lit up from her eyes, and the alchemy array implanted in the deepest part of her soul was activated, burning the source of all the dead and living. Then, The world reversed, as if everything in the world was rapidly breaking, spinning, and reorganizing, causing the surrounding thick fog to turn into a blurred illusion, swallowing everything. In a trance, it seemed that a figure with a crown and halo rose from the crack of the earth, showing a solemn posture behind Murin. At the cost of collecting souls, the ruler of the abyss descended with great power. All the corpses on the ground turned into ashes, and the pale ashes gathered in Murin's hand, forming a strange curved sword sickle. I really shouldn't have coveted that bottle of good wine, Murin whispered softly, slowly, raising the sword sickle in her hand. Come on, Huayvin, let me experience the power of the Prince of Paradise. At that moment, the brilliance rose from the blade. The sword of virtue burst out with a cry. The world condensed by this illusion shook, and the blazing light spread in all directions. The shrill collision sound burst out with the crisscrossing of figures. At the moment when they brushed past each other, Murin's movement stiffened, and a fine crack appeared on the sword sickle in her hand and her neck. Then, as the bone sword in his hand collapsed, blood flowed out from the wound. She raised her finger with difficulty and stroked her throat. Staring at the wisp of blood on her fingertip, she couldn't help but laugh. You can't even feel pain. You're really gentle, Lord Huai Jijun. Izaki fell to his knees. With the collapse of the last pillar, the mystic instrument that maintained the seal fell apart, and the mist quickly dissipated. The silent world disappeared without a trace. Ruins, fire, rain, wails, blood and fire, everything returned. Everything was silent when he left, but now, in front of Huaishi's eyes, the streets had been burned to ashes, and only thick smoke was rising. He had returned to this world filled with pain. Just behind Huaishi, Swearin opened his mouth with difficulty, as if he was staring at someone who did not exist. He said something, but no sound could be heard. Beneath her, a young and tender face could be seen in the blood that was slowly spreading out. So, with this as a medium, the illusion that should not exist here appeared in front of Huaishi. Standing in front of Huaishi, he enjoyed everything burning in front of him with him. Huaishi frowned. That was a child. Black hair, black eyes, white skin like a Roman. He was staring at such a tragic scene, but there was a distant and cold smile on his face. It was déjà vu. The child that he had met once in the general's mansion appeared in front of Huaishi again. Ah, you bleeding soil, you are the body of the noblest hero in history. Forgive me for dealing with these butchers. May disaster befall the murderer who splashed such precious blood. The child strolled on the broken street, as if he had come to his own stage. Facing countless audiences, he opened his hands and exaggeratedly recited the immortal masterpiece from Shakespeare. Thy wounds, like many silent mouths, open their crimson lips, and beseech my tongue to speak for them to the world. And it is in them that I now prophesy that a curse will descend upon the limbs of men. That violent and cruel civil strife will throw this place into chaos. That bloodshed and destruction will be the order of the day, and that all compassion will be utterly extinguished by the habit of killing. Send the order to slaughter to the world. Let the dogs of war ravage everywhere. For this evil crime, the earth will be filled with moaning corpses begging for burial. The long monologue ended in an impassioned rebuke, but no one offered applause. Only Huaishi looked at him coldly. The child turned back and looked at his face, still smiling. It takes the entire ship of greed to send my meme to you. It's not easy to see you, Huaishi. Huaishi was indifferent. Sorry, I'm not interested in playing with children. Child? The child was stunned for a moment, and his expression immediately became strange. It was unknown whether it was surprise or admiration, but he couldn't help but laugh. I'm a child in your eyes? Huaishi, you're really a freak. With his laughter, the phantoms in front of Huaishi began to change constantly, from a youth to the sinister and eccentric old man, the messenger who brought temptation like the devil, the coquettish and charming courtesan, the mature and elegant middle-aged man, the young girl in white, the dying woman, and the crying baby in swaddling clothes. Their postures and appearances were different, but they all had black hair, black eyes, fair skin, and a smile that was always full of alienation. Finally, the phantoms shrank, and countless images overlapped. They turned into a young man with a gorgeous face like a girl, wearing a black vest, breeches, and a white shirt. He held a delicate whip in his hand, stepped on the wreckage of the ruins, and looked up a Huaishir with a smile. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Huaishir." He bowed, put his hand on his chest, and saluted. "According to the records left by my predecessor, you can call me William Robert Woodman." The young man smiled and introduced himself. "Woodman from Golden Dawn." From her pitch-black eyes, a bright golden flame burst forth, contrasting with her beautiful face, making her look majestic and dignified, like a divine Buddha, inviolable. He was one of the three founders of Golden Dawn, the elemental of destruction, the creator of the land of dreams, Woodman. In a long silence, Huaishir didn't speak. He looked at him. He imagined how he could smoothly take the angry lord of the flies out of his pocket and then shoot him in the head. "Don't be nervous. What exists here is just an illusion. Even if you taste something, you can't feel the taste. Even if you bathe in the rain, you can't feel the warmth. At best, it's just a video call." He looked at Huaishir's pocket with a faint smile, as if he knew what he wanted to do. He shrugged slightly and said, "You don't have to take out the Lord of the Flies to pollute my ears, do you?" In the silence, only the angry roar of the Lord of the Flies in Huaishir's backpack could be heard. "Woodman, F*CKU. You've been dead for so many years. Why are you still pretending to be a foreigner?" Woodman shrugged and turned a deaf ear to her words. The flickering phantom only looked at Huaishir's face and sighed with exultation. "I have to say, our meeting was really a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to meet you here in order to reap another result. Huaishir, God knows how happy I was when I met you at the general's place. It's a pity that you didn't come and play with me. I've prepared many gifts for you." Speaking of this, he patted his head and said, "By the way, you did a good job in the Land of Dusk. Mathers has been praising you, not only in Golden Dawn, but you're also a popular idol in the Abyss. The more trouble the Sunmaker caused, the more resounding your name will be. Those workshop owners hate you so much that they've been biting their handkerchiefs under their blankets." "Ha ha!" As he laughed, his expression became serious, and he asked solemnly and seriously, "Then, before we start the official topic, how about we go through the process first?" He paused, cleared his throat, stretched out his hand, and asked with enthusiasm and anticipation. As a member of the utopia recognized by the Vientiane sphere, Huaishir, do you want to come to our side? Huaishir looked at him silently. His gaze passed through the illusion and looked at the world full of pain behind him. "I'm your enemy, Woodman." He said, "Don't joke like this again, okay? This has never changed." "Ha ha ha. Sure enough, it's not time yet." Woodman laughed indifferently. He slowly turned around and stood beside Huaishir, staring at the world shrouded in smoke and flames with him. He was full of smiles. "First of all, I have to congratulate you, Huaishir. What you've done is worthy of being a hero. It's rare and commendable. Your struggle has successfully saved some people and delayed the arrival of this moment compared to the plan." He thought for a moment and said, "About 30 minutes. After exhausting everyone's efforts, they only got half an hour of time. Half an hour later, everything still fell into destruction. Unfortunately, whether you wait for death or resist, you can't change the outcome. War will only make the destruction come faster," Woodman said. Woodman said, "In some ways, your counterattack has caused the destruction of this place to accelerate." "Are you showing off your power to me, Woodman? You probably misunderstood something, Huaishir." Woodman's expression became strange. The one who besieged the inner circle of Donbua was Extreme Tao. The one who gave the order to kill them was General. The one who was indifferent was Emperor, and the one who ignored it was Astronomy Society. "I'm just an illusion. Even if I just leave the range of the Land of Dreams, my real body will be poisoned and die. You can't blame me for all this just because I saw you, right?" He paused for a moment, and his smile became warmer and warmer. There was no alienation. "At best, I just made some insignificant suggestions. Look, why sure, I didn't bewitch, instigate, or deceive them. I just said what they wanted to hear, and they became so rational that it makes one's hair stand on end. Bang. It was a loud bang. Huaisher pulled the trigger, aimed at his face, and pulled the trigger again and again. He emptied an entire magazine, turning the young man in front of him into a pile of mud riddled with holes. Blood splattered everywhere, and then slowly disappeared. In front of Huaisher, the broken body didn't fall. It just looked at the young man in front of it with pity. On the broken head, there was an incomplete smile. It's too late, Huaisher. In that instant, a premonition of death descended from the sky. The dark clouds in the sky lit up with an inexplicable brilliance. It was a big star. The burning steel star fell, tearing through the clouds and falling towards the earth. Falling, and falling. It was a missile. Huaisher looked up, and his eyes were illuminated by the destructive sparks. 3 minutes ago, Yokota Air Force Base in Edo. The black-haired, black-eyed old Roman man held his palm and smiled as he stared at the commander pressing the launch button. Then, the earth rumbled and flames spewed out. In the spontaneously fired well, the steel star rose slowly towards the sky. Now, it fell from the sky, in the whistling sound. Do you know how hell was created? Huaisher. In a shrill scream, Woodman smiled and raised his hand. Just a little blood, a little pain, a little death, and most importantly, a little despair. Snap! With a crisp snap of the fingers, the light of extinction fell from the sky. In a roar that sounded like thousands of people singing hymns in unison, the cluster of missiles split from the sky and scattered the seeds of death to the earth. In an instant, everything in front of them was swallowed up. Jingdo shook violently. Countless flames rose up violently from the ground, convulsing like angry palms as they reached out to grab at the sky. In a shaking of the earth, the destruction finally reached its climax. In the broken izakaya, Maki only heard the loud roar and subconsciously pressed the proprietress and Satoko under her body. Then, the heavy plank collapsed under the impact of the blast. The world seemed to have become dead silent in an instant. No sound could be heard. Only some small flying insects seemed to have entered her ears, and they kept chirping. She coughed with difficulty, propped up her body, and used all her strength to lift the collapsed beam. She shouted, "Auntie Jinjiang, Satoko, are you okay? Satoko! Satoko!" Behind her, Jinjiang's face was pale and covered with dust. In her arms, Satoko was safe and sound. Maki breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. But then she saw the proprietress's face change. She was shouting something to her, but the voice was too far away, and she couldn't hear it clearly. Maki felt that someone had punched her in the back. She swayed. When she lowered her head, she saw blood flowing from her chest. This. How? She murmured blankly, collapsed on the ground, and turned her head with difficulty. In her blurred vision, she only saw a few fully armed figures slowly approaching. A high-risk mixed breed found, shoot to kill. Distinguishing the mixed breed features on her face, the young soldier with the gun raised the weapon in his hand and aimed at her face. No, don't kill her. In the ruins, Jin Jiang staggered up and stood in front of the girl, waving her hand anxiously. She's just a worker. She doesn't know anything. She didn't participate in the riot. I can testify she has been protecting us. Don't kill her. I beg you. I beg you." The young soldier was stunned. Looking at the weeping face, he froze on the spot. But behind him, there was a gunshot. "Don't waste time, B4, let's go." Beside the convoy, the captain put down the gun indifferently and turned to leave. Jinjiang lowered her head with difficulty, saw the blood on her chest, and fell to the ground. In a long silence, Tomoko looked at her blankly, as if she couldn't react. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. But when the cold blood spread to her feet, she finally understood what had happened. "Mom," Tomoko suppressed her trembling and carefully touched her cheeks. Seeing the sorry face, she squeezed out a smile with difficulty. "Am I going to die?" She looked at the gray sky blankly, looking at her daughter's crying face, as if she didn't understand what had happened, but also as if a burden had been lifted. It was finally going to end. She had thought about it many times, but now that it had really come, she began to feel sad. Seeing her daughter cry, she began to regret not working harder. Just like she had always done, gritting her teeth and persevering, there was always a chance to turn things around. She could hold on. But this time, she felt that she couldn't hold on anymore. It's so hard to live. She coughed violently. She wanted to laugh, but she couldn't help crying. I'm sorry, Tomoko. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She wanted to say sorry to Fukasaku. She wanted to say sorry to Mr. Takahashi. She wanted to comfort these children not to be afraid, and she wanted to say more. She slowly closed her eyes, crying in despair. She looked at all of this in a daze. She felt that the world had become strange again. She couldn't understand. There were too many things in this world that she couldn't figure out, and there were too many things that she couldn't understand. After leaving Daoquan village, the outside world seemed to be always so fickle, not allowing her to slowly understand and understand. Everything had become too cruel. She didn't even have time to react. But why is that? She covered her face, choking, and shouted at the backs of those who left. Aren't you here to kill me? Why? She was clearly innocent. Everyone was in the darkness. A bright red spot spread in front of her eyes. Under the pain and suffocation, she bent down, wanting to roar silently, but no sound came out. The pain brewed in her body, burning like a flame. She slowly raised her head. Under the pitch-black ghost horns, scarlet tears flowed out of her eyes. I'll kill you all. There seemed to be a cry in the distance. Toshio stood blankly in the dissipating smoke, looking around, but the old man who had been holding his hand to escape was gone. Something seemed to have fallen from the sky and landed far away. Then, many things disappeared along with Annie and Eishan. They could no longer be seen. However, when he finally lowered his head, he saw a severed arm amidst the rubble. There were still traces of the ring on the arm. The ring had been sold a long time ago. Annie Uchiyama said that he could go to school if he saved a little more money, but now, Annie Uchiyama was gone. He trembled as he knelt on the ground, holding the broken arm, tears flowing silently. There was a loud noise in the distance. Someone was coming, but he didn't want to run anymore. It didn't matter who it was. Just kill me. There was only a desperate prayer left. But no one listened to this prayer, no one cared. In this gloomy world, there were continuous explosions, and the sharp cries gradually dissipated. The sky had stopped raining. But the blood and tears on the ground didn't stop. Now, the peak of the cries disappeared. Despair descended. Accompanied by the pain of countless people, the light from hell appeared on the ground. It's time. In the darkness, the god spread out his 6 arms, dancing in ecstasy. The great day has come. From the top of his head, a purple-black halo slowly appeared. The solemn and strange light flowed in all directions along with the resonance between the swamps. Relying on the countless souls immersed in despair as a fulcrum, the halo of divinity quickly expanded, spreading, and in an instant, enveloped the entire inner circle of Donbua. Every soul in despair merged into the halo of the god of hell, allowing the abyss in their souls to spread, resonating with the blessed land in the distance. The sleeping god of hell opened his eyes and looked at the scene in the distance. Pain, blood, death, and despair. Under the convergence of countless elements, hell on earth was born. Hell, Donbua's inner circle, depth 1, in the Ingzhou branch of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The alarm spread. Detection of a deep area of the present realm. Detection of a destructive element. Rancher. Detection of a destructive element fusion phenomenon. Cleansing list activated. At that moment, the silent Doomsday bell in the Survival Academy rang loudly. The mighty bell woke up every pair of eyes in the border prison test area. The huge things sleeping in the darkness slowly woke up. At the same time, from Dongxia, America, Egypt, the Russian Federation, the present realm, the border, and even the deepest part of hell, countless people's gazes fell on Ingzhou through the broadcast, secret mirror, miracle engraving, and scouting mirror. In the ivory tower, in the principal's office, Russell smoked silently, staring at the projection from the dragon's summoning flute, his fingers tapping on the table anxiously. Waiting. The sound of rain. I heard someone crying. Yes. Many people are dead. I know. Under the light rain, Yuan Zhao turned back and looked at the fire in the Dambua's inner circle in the distance. Big Sister Yi, is it really okay for us to do this? In front, Yi Shuya held an umbrella and turned back to look at the depressed young man behind her, her eyes full of pity. Yuan Zhao, I'm very sorry about everything that happened, but this has nothing to do with us. We still have our own work to complete. The first thing to do when you become an adult is to learn not to pay for other people's mistakes. In the silence, Yuan Zhao stopped in his tracks. It's not like this, he said. It shouldn't be like this. The young man looked into Yi Shuya's eyes and told her seriously, they didn't make a mistake, they just didn't have a choice. In the silence, Yi Shuya's eyebrows slowly raised, as if she was getting to know the little brat in front of her again. She looked at his eyes and brows, carefully examining them. Yuan Zhao, on the other hand, seemed to have used up all his courage. He lowered his head, avoiding her gaze. Big Sister Yi, there must be something wrong with me, he muttered dejectedly. Previously, I clearly liked Miss Huaiji to death, but now, I can't even remember her appearance. In the past, I clearly hated that group of bastards, but now I can't just sit and watch them die. Sometimes, a man will encounter some things, and then he will be stupid, do some irrational things, and not care about himself. But a man will encounter this kind of thing once in his life. His second grandfather once said to him, if a man can't learn to be smart, it doesn't matter if he's stupid for a lifetime, but you must know what you're doing. Some things can't be done, but some things, once done, even if you die, it won't be a pity. But that old man didn't go into too much detail. He just wiped the shiny spear in his tipsy state. And when he recalled the past, the corners of his mouth always carried a smile. You'll know when you meet Yuan Zhao. When the time comes, you should go on stage. You shouldn't just stand there. I think, now it should be my time. The young man raised his head and said goodbye to Yi Shuya. I'm sorry, Big Sister Yi. He said, I'm going to play the hero. The young man quietly said goodbye and retreated step by step. He reached out his hand from this thin rein and pulled out the trident in the air. In the midst of the rain, the dragon horse's neigh rang out. The huge horse under the tiger and leopard armor trampled on its iron hooves, breaking through the rain. It impatiently called out to him. In a short silence, Yi Shuya didn't get angry, nor did he get disappointed. Instead, he laughed softly. Under the umbrella, that woman happily flicked the ash in her hand. Yuan Zhao. She waved her hand and wished him well. You must succeed. That goes without saying. The young man on horseback raised his head and naturally responded. Tightening the reins, he turned the horse around and galloped towards the burning sky. A storm came head-on, and there was also the ice-cold rain. His lungs were trembling, and his heart was contracting. But when his blood was rushing, it was so hot, and it was also singing along with his soul, as if it was cheering. Let's go, Liu. In the midst of galloping, a cold silver armor appeared on the young man's body. The scarlet tassels fluttered in the wind, as fierce as fire. The dragon's cry, along with the huge horse's neigh, spread out in all directions, rolling up the wind and rain, causing the thin rain that filled the sky to roll back and merge into the gradually rising hurricane. Yuan Zhao Charge. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.